Recording in progress.
Okay, alright, it's 7:03, we're at the City Council chambers, February 18th. Omega, can you call roll?
George?
Here.
Buckles?
Present.
Flynn?
Here.
Hebert? Hodges?
Here.
Houston? Monteroy?
Here. Alright, let's stand for the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. So I've got a couple changes. It's mostly moving some things around. We were going to move, so first, for F, for presentations, Keller isn't able to make it. Their geotech person is sick, so cross them off. I was going to move presentations, so it's just Steve Donovan now. Presentations up before public hearings. Sounds like Liam's public hearing will be long.
Now he's going to give us a short version.
Then new business number 1, we're gonna cross off interim city manager. That got left over. Should be a vote on that next meeting.
Should he say delayed due to sickness again?
The
The last page in the packet says they're sick. Or
yeah, I think that's part of it. And then new business, I was gonna add an item for us to discuss about matching some community facade grants that are going on right now, and just discuss it with everybody and see what they think.
that'd be like number 5.
Yeah, the new 4. Yeah,
Okay.
the new 4. If I can get a pen to work all. There you go. Okay, that worked with everybody? Got it down, okay. Okay, so then, now, first up, we have, oh wait, yeah.
Oh, not this one.
Before I get to Steve, I almost skipped over the first comment period. Omega, do we have any comment cards?
We did not.
Okay, now we can have Steve Donovan come up.
Thank you for doing this. Liam, thank you for allowing me to sneak in here.
Let's have you turn your mic on real quick for the little one. Alright, thank you.
Good. Everybody good to go?
Oh, sure, so.
What would a meeting be without a PowerPoint, right? So, good evening, everybody. Tonight, I am tardy in my presentation. Normally, I would have been in front of you in the fall of 2024 to talk about where we are and what we're doing. So tonight, I'm going to talk to you about how you ended fiscal 23-24, which would have been June 30th, 2024. Talk about your current budget and our forecast for the plans going forward for the utilities. For those new on the council, we've been doing this for 20 years. Every year we make this presentation and we try to do a forecast, a 5-year forecast of where to go. The council for a long history has had an interest in having a plan, having a financial plan that's associated with their master plans, and having small, regular rate increases rather than big, uneven, unnatural rate increases. So tonight, we're just following through on that sort of strategy. So, first, we're going to talk about the results of 23-24. I will be brief. I will be out of your hair in 10 minutes. We'll talk about water, and we'll talk about sewer. We're going to talk about neighboring communities' rates. The council has always liked to look at what's everybody in the patch doing. Doesn't mean a hill of beans for your costs, but it does tell you where you are relative to your comparison communities. There's a policy issue I want to talk to you tonight. Normally, we don't don't do this, but there's something I wanted to visit with you folks, and that's about outside city rates. And we'll visit on that a little bit, and then we'll loop back questions for you folks. So, first and foremost, how did you end up in fiscal 23-24? Now what this is a pretty simple income statement, frankly. And if you remember, I was here in the fall of 2023, and I recommended no increase on water at that time, and a very small increase on sewer. The reason we didn't recommend a water increase was because you had just implemented your meter swap out program. And surprise, surprises, without a rate increase and with good cost controls on your part, you actually generated more revenue than we thought. So congratulations, your meter program has borne fruit. People are actually paying for the water that they use. And I've got cities all over the country that have gone through what you do. And some of the meters, Kai, some of those meters were over 35 years old.
That's correct, yeah.
So what happens with mechanical water meters is when they age, they always err to the side of less metering. They never over meter. So for years and years, you were giving water away through faulty meters. And to the tune this year, you had a net surplus of $512,438. That was revenues over expenses for the year. That $512,000 then fell to the bottom line and became cash for the beginning fund balance, which will be July 1 of 2024, which we're in the fiscal year now. So water is in good shape. And this ebbs and flows. There's a yin and yang about the financial conditions of our utilities, depending on expenditures. 20 years ago, when you start building Stony Mountain, we didn't have 2 nickels to rub together in the water fund because we were spending like crazy. And then conversely, in 2000, the sewer fund had a negative fund balance. So over the years, we go up and we go down, but we have a plan to manage that. Now sewer, I'm concerned about sewer, and I gotta tell you this. You started the year with 2.3 million and you ended the year with 1.7 million. You had a $621,000 loss on sewer. So before you start thinking about suicidal thoughts here, the preponderance, not the preponderance, but a good piece of that net income loss was timing. We didn't get reimbursed on grants from the grant program, particularly on the Yamhill Street project, and that money did come in this year. So we got $260,000 of grant reimbursement this year that was incurred last year. Still, I still have issues, and I want to visit with you on sewer about that. So let's talk about the plan for water. I am recommending a very modest 3.08% increase, effectively keeping up with inflation, but also keeping us in concert with covenants on your long-term debt. You do have one bond outstanding on the water side, the 2016 water refunding bonds. So during the fiscal year this year, the budget for capital outlays is $525,000. This is keeping the store running. I mean, we're talking about capital repairs, replacements, and improvements, just making sure that the trains run on time, for lack of a better term. This is utilities is a constant maintenance situation. You folks know this. We're not talking about any new debt, so we're going to use cash for all repairs and replacements on the distribution system. There's no plan for new debt on the horizon. We don't have any expansion for SCI and no known new water demands right now, but I'm going to visit with you about this outside city thing in a minute. We're going to start planning for the Priority 1 master plan projects. You last year completed your water master plan update, and guess what? You got a lot of stuff to do.
Oh yeah.
No surprise. First thing, distribution projects. Looping, fire flow, and safety. Looping is for pressure and for flow. Fire flow is obviously for flow, and then capacity. We've still got lines that need to be replaced to enhance capacity in the system. The Ballston pump station, that's a high priority. You've got to replace, and I'll put all kinds of little letters in here to confuse you. PLC, programmable logic controllers. It's the brains of the system. And PRV, it's a pressure reducing valve. If we didn't have that at that station, you'd have 200-pound water at your house and you'd blow up your toilets. Seismic improvements, this is facing everyone. We've got infrastructure in the ground that was never sized to any seismic standard. Tank 3, the Ballston tank, and then a new water main between the water plant and the Ballston pump station. These are projects high priority that we've got to start thinking about. We've got money in the bank, and you've got lots of dry powder if you had to take on debt, but we got to get moving on this stuff. And Kyle, I'm sure he'll be beating on you for that very reason. So, the 5-year forecast changes in revenue requirements. What this is simply think about what future rate increases are going to be on an annual percentage basis. Now you'll notice here that they're all kind of level, and we modeled it that way. We want level, predictable increases. But that means we've got to manage your cash. If we don't have enough cash in 1 year, we're going to have to take it out of the bank, as it were, out of reserves, so that we keep this nice level line. And if you'll notice in 2030, the bar goes down a little bit. That's when we pay off the 2016 loan. And that'll give us right about time when you're going to start thinking about your water treatment plant replacement project. That's going to be $15 to $20 million. So it used to be $7 million, now it's 20. So just keep that in the back pocket, that's coming down the pike, and that's going to be that's why we plan for this stuff. That's why we look at this. So come 2030, we're going to retire that debt, but I'm pretty sure you're going to take on another big debt for a very important water treatment plant replacement. So let's talk about historical and projected fund balance. Remember when I talked about that nice level line of rate increases? Well, in order to do that, we've got to use some of your cash, but we're still going to keep about $4.25 million of cash by the end. So I'm real proud of you folks on water. You are in a good position right now. You've got cash in the bank, you've got a plan for capital improvements, you've got a new master plan, and you've got a system that actually meters your water correctly. So you're in a good place on water. Let's talk about what this line is it really has to do with your liquidity. The blue line is the ending fund balance. Remember, it was slightly declining, ends up at 4.25 million. The red line is 90 days of operating expenses expressed in dollars. That blue line at all times must be above that red line, because your utilities are the life's blood of your city. And water, believe it or not, has a seasonality to it. 60 to 70% of your water is sold in between June and August. In the winter, you don't sell a whole lot of water. So there is seasonality, and we want that. And as this chart shows, you're in a good position. You've got high coverage of your operating requirements. Let's talk about the 5-year forecast of rates. Here's assuming 9 units, which takes into account summer watering. Right now, your water bill is $72.27 for that customer. At the end of 5 years, that number will be up to, $83.97. So that is a very modest and predictable increase. Effectively, 3% per year, every year, will get you from $72 today to about $84 in 5 years. Now let's talk about comparisons. This is the obligatory, what does everybody else pay? You are in the middle of the pack. You're not like Mac. Mac and Dundee are always cheap. Dundee, they're another one of those cities that they don't do anything on their rates for 5 years, and then at the end of the 5th year, they raise it by 40%. One of those guys. They did that with sewer last time, and that's the way they roll, so be it. Mac has always had low rates, so pretty enviable in my judgment. I mean, you look at Carleton and Lafayette and Willamina, you're not there, and you're not going to be there. After 5 years, you still won't be up there. And in 5 years, everybody else is going up. All right, let's talk about sewer. I'm going to ask you for 4%. Now that's still, inflation standards, gosh, that seems pretty modest, but we need to do some work on sewer. We definitely need to. Budgeted materials and services is $1.5 million this year. That's a lot of money relative to your history, but you're also embarking on some fairly substantial projects. The Yamhill and East Main Street project is the one that's, you're gonna get going on that, and I know Kyle will keep you up to date on it. We've been planning this for quite some time. It is a technically challenging project. We are going to tunnel under the river for part of this project. It is a substantial engineering challenge. We anticipate the bidding on the project in 2026. The engineer's estimate now is 10. Jim, you might remember when we started talking about this about 5 years ago, that project was $4 million.
Yeah.
So it's infuriating, but it is what it is. We no additional debt we're going to issue at this time, but I may be back to you depending on the funding package for this project. We're hoping and anticipating that this will be a grant-funded project. It may not, and the difference will have to come from new debt. You are a great credit. The Clean Water State Revolving Loan Program has money to lend you, so there's money to be had, but it's going to have to come. It could potentially come in the terms of low-cost loans, similar to what we got in water. And then finally, no expansion or reconfiguration of the lagoons. What we're hearing from the DEQ is enhanced water quality testing to the cities as part of their permit requirements. Kyle will keep you informed on what the DEQ tells you with respect to the permit. So here's the 5-year forecast. Now this time we're bouncing at 4%. Remember water, we were about 3% per year, level increases. So we're about 100 basis points, that's 1 percentage point above what we'd see in water, because we're in the process of doing some fairly substantial projects. There's also a potential out on Sheridan Road, for the sewer project on Sheridan Road. I'm recommending that we don't make our eyes bigger than our stomach. You may not have the bandwidth to do two projects at once, but if that project is grant funded, we definitely want to take advantage of the grant funding. Sheridan Road, that sewer line out there is undersized and it's got an I&I problem with it, so it needs to be done. It's probably going to happen realistically after the Yamhill and East Main Street project. But I'll leave that to the wizards of funding, really what happens there. The mayor, you have to go with your hat in your hand to get some grant funding for that. Okay, so historical, here's once again, you remember, we have 4% line, 4% per year. We're trying to keep that steady and predictable. In order to do that, notice how we're coming down, and by the end, we're only down to $1.72 million. You know, that sounds like a fortune, just a king's ransom. In the utility business, that's coffee and donuts for the crew. It's not a lot of money, and I'm very concerned about this reserve requirement here. Now, I'm also sympathetic to this council that I'm going to tell you, hey guys, we got to raise our rates so we can put money in the bank. Yeah, I'm going to look you in the face and say that with a straight face. It's hard to say that, but this reserve is going to be critical. Like we just talked about this year, the timing between grant reimbursements and remember, you got to pay the bills first, then you get reimbursed on the grant. What happens if we have $3 million of bills this year and it takes 18 months to get reimbursed? We'd be in big trouble. So that's where my heartburn is. So let's talk about the funding balance here, ending fund balance. This is at a different scale than what you saw in water. The blue line is still above the red line, but it only covers your 90 days requirement by only about 2.5 times. So once again, if we have a very upset condition where we're out of pocket more than we have in our fund balance, I don't know where we're going to get the money. So we're going to have to manage this as best we can until we can get that reserve built back up. Debbie Downer here. 5-year forecast on rates. Now this is just sewer. Remember, there's $3.50 we add on top of this for stormwater. But today it's at $50.98, and I got to tell you, that is a remarkably low rate for sewer across the state. I have a couple of cities in Central Oregon that they're paying already over $100 a month just for sewer. Our friends over in Astoria, they're already $110 a month for sewer. So just think about that. And over the course of 5 years, that number would go from $50.98 to about $62, implying a 4% per year increase over those times. Steady, predictable increases. I know you guys like that. And then here is the rates. Look at among your peers here in Yamhill County. You're among the lowest sewer rates in the region. And there's 3 letters that make this happen. FCI. If we didn't have FCI, we wouldn't have that. They help us so much on scale. They are an extremely important customer, and inside the city, very important. So here's comparison with stormwater. Once again, $3.50, but look at Salem. They're $23 on stormwater. Now here is the whole enchilada, and we're talking water, sewer, street maintenance, stormwater, and more, the last piece of that bar, the orange piece there, is public safety / general city services. More and more cities are simply saying, we can't keep the machine running without having a fee added on the utility bill for cops, for parks, for libraries, for general city services. It's coming your way. I know that's something that you don't want to see and want to hear, but it's getting to be more and more common. Gresham, I think they're at $15 a month just for cops over in Gresham, talking about raising that to $30 because they can't have a public safety levy that passes, so they're putting it on the utility bill. Got coin-operated cops. So what I'm telling you here is, and that's cold comfort for you folks, but your utility bills are very, very attractive relative to most of your peers here in Yamhill County. And I attribute this back to this prediction of slow, small annual increases with a financial plan going 5 years out so you can anticipate what's going on. It really has paid dividends for you. And then here is the SDCs. We all know what those are on new development. You are near the bottom, but just look at Newburgh. And I've got some that are over $50,000 for a single family home before you put a shovel of dirt in the ground. Now I want to talk to you about an issue that you probably might have been hearing along the edges, but I wanted to bring it to you. Sheridan doesn't charge a surcharge for any customers that are connected to your utility systems that are outside the city limits. All of your peers do. And what we're going to show you here is how much more do they charge. And McMinnville Water and Light is 200% twice the inside city rate. Newburgh, Carlton, and Yamhill are 150% of the inside rate. Lafayette, Amity, 120, and Dayton and Dundee, and then Willamine is 115. The reason I bring this up is I got wind that there could be a potential for an enhanced demand for water at the Delphian School. And they're paying the same rate as you folks are paying here, yet you're extending services outside your city limits. That is not the intent of urban services. The intent would be for those people who are outside city should be induced to annex in, because logically they are taking advantage of your urban services. They drive on your streets. They could use your libraries. They could use your cops. They could use all of your other urban services without paying for them. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm not making a recommendation, but I think you should consider this, especially if the Delphian School wants to drop their meter or take out their 2-inch meter and put in a larger meter and take more water. I'm not zeroing out the Delphian School. It's just you're different than what your other communities are of your peer communities. And that's all I've got for tonight. So, we're back to questions. I'm asking for a 3% increase on water and a 4% on sewer. Normally, we would have done that January 1st. I would like you to do that as soon as practicable. Would that be March would be great, April at the latest, because as we're going through the fiscal year, we're losing momentum, we're losing our speed here. And I don't wanna lose that momentum. So, you got any questions? I'll get out of your hair, you can get on to Lean then. The fun stuff.
Liz might be raising a hand, I thought I heard that pop sound. Liz, do you have a question?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
So if we raise the sewer and water rates, does that have to go before the voters? What's our next step as a council on that?
No, those rates don't have to go to the voters, because we do that.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Thank you.
Jim?
You mentioned the concept of adding a, can't call it a fee, of adding, yeah, I guess we would call it a fee, adding additional amounts to the water and sewer bill for cops, et cetera.
Sure.
We tried that once for a $13.24 increase to get us 2 more cops. Overwhelmingly, no.
It has to be referred, there's no question about it.
Yep.
Something like that, and I'm with you. Other cities without charter limitations have done it under their council authority, like Gresham, like all the ones you saw there, without referring them, but I'm with you. If you refer to me that, hey, I wanna raise your bill, and I can vote on it, probably gonna say no. But, with Measure 5, and the thing about Measure 5 is so interesting to me. It was originally pitched as giving voters and cities local control. It did the exact opposite. It took complete control away from you. Now your hands are completely tied. That's why all these other groups are going to the utility bill. Because the costs aren't going away, they're growing faster than anybody ever expected.
Any other, you wanna add any?
Yeah, I would just wanna add one thing. Normal inflation is about 2% a year, so raising the water bill by 3% is only actually increasing our water fund by about 1%. That doesn't cover across the board. It does cover our increase as well, so medical, that doesn't go up 3% a year or 2%, that goes up 10 to 15%. There are a lot of other costs that don't match the economy inflation. So I just wanted to mention that.
What about the 9% we had during COVID? Or
Yeah.
we weren't going up that high.
No.
Well, I'm just impressed how penny pinching wise you folks are out there. You are very tight with the dollar. And it's proven, your rates are low, yet your systems are working. Because usually what happens, the first thing that I sniff when I see really low rates and not people resisting increasing rates, is their systems are falling apart.
Like Jim?
When we talk about, you mentioned the Delphians, because I'm sure they use a large amount of water, but I'll call it a trailer park at the end of
Oh, yeah,
the road is
yeah,
outside.
they're on sewer too.
And then also, would we be talking about basically anybody outside the city limits that we supply water to?
That's right.
So some could actually come to some individuals if they're hooked up.
And this is a complete, your attorney can tell you this is a complete policy call on your part. You have all the authority in the world to charge whatever you want.
Thank you.
I think we might, we can check with Kai, but we almost have to connect the Delphian school up in a different manner if we're wanting to use Stony, is that right? So that might
That
be,
is an eventuality, yes.
yeah, so that might be a different scenario too.
Right. It would be.
But,
They would potentially have to provide their own storage and fire protection at that point.
Just gonna just say basically what you just said, but expand a little bit on it, in that I think we have to increase the size of the pipe to the Delphian school. And they, to be able to provide more water, and they want more water, and that tap comes off higher up than our water plant too. It's like in a weird spot, and the line is like lost to, whatever. So like no one knows where it is or whatever. So like that's kind of the thing, is like I feel like before we go to the Delphian school and say, hey, we're gonna raise their rates 100% or whatever, you know, we should be like, we're offering you more water too, but in these brand new lines, so.
And I pulled a pin, I said, here's the hand grenade. This is something that you should consider, and that's what you don't have to do.
Okay, go ahead.
Something that Steve reminded me of, he talked about the outside users having the same rates as people inside city limits, but they have the benefit of extra urban services. That's true. No one in the city is identified except for the Delphian and the outside water users in our master plan. The city's identified for projects, but the outside services are identified in the water master plan and how much it costs to keep those up. It's over $1 million. So that's something that the city is not saving up for. We don't have a separate pot of money for that, so that means everybody in town is paying for that.
No question. Hence, why we're bringing it up.
Liz, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. What is the standard surcharge for residents and like the Delphian School outside the city limits? What would be the standard surcharge? Would that generate enough money?
It sounds like it varies, right?
It varies from 115% up to 200%. So that's the range that we're seeing just in your peers here. In my experience, most communities are 150 to 200%. If you'll notice on that chart in your packets, you'll also notice Salem was a 0. Salem won't let you connect to their system unless you annex.
Oh, okay.
We're glad to serve you urban services, but you must annex. So, and that boat has sailed with the Delphian School, obviously. That's not going to happen. But to answer your question, 115 all the way up to 200% is the range.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Lucy?
That would include the prison also?
No, the prison is inside the city, and his predecessor, Walt, was sage. When FCI was first spoken around here, made it an F Walt, and I mean Walt, in the strength of his character, said, you cannot come into our community unless you annex. And that was so sage and so smart. It provided you with a base load of capacity, as it were. And they're also paying your property taxes. Well, maybe they're not. No, maybe they're not.
They're exempt from something like that.
But that was very wise that they are inside the city limits.
It took a flight to Washington, D.C. to accomplish.
Yeah. And I to this day, I think, as much as Walt drove me crazy, that was a stroke of genius, and he stuck to his guns, and I mean, he got yelled at big time. I mean, and he stuck with it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Oh, sorry, thank you.
Now you can enjoy leaving.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Steve. Drive safe.
All right, we'll see you guys. Stay dry.
See you next time.
Okay. So, a little bit confused. You just start the hearing and then we listen to Liam, or how do we do this?
Yeah. So you start hearing. So here, the script will guide.
Okay. All right. So, I will start reading. Okay. Good evening, my name is Cale George. I'm the mayor of the city of Sheridan. I'm presiding over this public hearing. This is the time and place set for the public hearing in the matter of file number LA-24-002, a legislative amendment initiated by the city of Sheridan proposing changes to multiple sections of Title 16 of the Sheridan Municipal Code. These amendments are to ensure that Title 16 of the Municipal Code, known as the Sheridan Development Code, is compliant with changing state housing law. Amendments include allowing duplexes in all residential zones, allowing the construction of single-room occupancy dwellings, increasing the size of permitted accessory dwelling units, and quality of life changes which simplify the code, among others. The hearing is now open. It is 7:38 p.m. This public hearing will proceed first with the staff report, After a summary of the proposed amendments and applicable criteria are presented, interested parties are given an opportunity to testify. Any party testifying before the council must give their name and address for the record. An issue which may be the basis for an appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals shall be raised not later than at the final public hearing on this case. Such issue shall be raised with and accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford this body and the parties to this hearing an adequate opportunity to respond to each issue. At the conclusion of the city council public hearing, the city council may either approve with provisions, deny, or take no action on the proposed amendments. If amendments are approved, the city council will adopt an ordinance at a future meeting that provides an effective date for the amendments. Okay. So before we begin with the staff report, I must ask a few questions. For the audience, are there any objections to the jurisdiction of the council to hear this matter? For the city council, are there any declarations of conflict of interest by any council member? Okay. For the audience, are there any challenges as to conflicts of interest related to any member of the council? Okay. So, Liam, who is our city planner, please give the staff report.
All right, thank you. That's a shorter script than the quasi-judicial one, so it's a little easier to get through. So just gonna kick things off with saying that most folks were here when we did the work session and should be generally familiar with these amendments. Here we haven't met yet, so this may be a lot of information for you. Because we've already gone through most of this content at length, this is gonna be sort of the overview. Here's what we've changed since the last time we talked. And here is the formal staff report findings. This is the order that was signed by the Planning Commission as a result of the first public hearing. So, just getting into it, I'm going to begin by entering in the applicable criteria. So all of the criteria can be found in the Sheridan Development Code, section 16.542.040, approval criteria, and that's approval criteria for a legislative amendment. The first criteria would be from section 16.42.040.A, which is going to be compliance with the statewide planning goals. So there's a lot of statewide planning goals, and the vast majority don't apply. I'm going to cover in this one all the statewide planning goals that staff have found to apply. The first goal is goal 1, citizen involvement. The City Council and Planning Commission have held public work sessions to discuss these amendments. And the Planning Commission and City Council will or have both conducted public hearings. So we are compliant with goal 1. Goal 2 is land use planning. The way we maintain compliance with this goal is by making our 35-day post-acknowledgement plan amendment. That means prior to our first hearing, we gave the state 35 days of notice to comment, and anybody on that pop-up comment list. The state declined to comment before the first hearing. They did comment before this hearing. They did not give us that much time to incorporate feedback. Some of the feedback was incorporated, some of it wasn't. Generally, DLCD was supportive of the amendments. They encouraged us to go a little farther and add a little bit more, and we don't really have the time to accommodate that. So generally, the state was supportive of the amendments. The next goal that applies is goal 7, areas subject to natural hazards. What's the biggest natural hazard area? This is a planning pop quiz. It's okay. That's the river. So we have the 100-year floodplain. You mean the special hazard?
The special flood hazard area, which includes the floodway and the 100-year floodplain. Because we are going to be changing what uses are permitted in the special flood hazard area. However, we participate in the NFIP, the National Flood Insurance Program, and all development will still comply with our floodplain development standards, which are the next thing we're going to have to amend. For this amendment, the criteria of this goal are met. The next goal that applies would be goal 10, which is the housing goal. Primarily, goal 10 is for if you change the zone, right? If you are increasing or decreasing the stock of buildable lands for housing. We're not doing that. We're not changing the designation of any lands. There is no rezone included in these amendments.
There will be no negative impact to the amount of buildable residential lands, and in fact, we're gonna be adding more uses for buildable residential lands. So theoretically, we're increasing the housing supply, but we're not actually rezoning or changing any lands or annexing anything as part of this. So it actually, the criteria are met or they do not apply for goal 10. Goal 11 is interesting. So goal 11 is public facilities and services. We just talked a lot about public facilities and services. These proposed amendments do change what densities are permitted in residential districts, and they will impact all residential districts. However, these are mandated changes, so goal 11 shall not apply. The changes that really increase density are mandated by the state. Goal 12 is much the same, right? This does potentially change our transportation need. Goal 12 is transportation. However, specifically worded in some of these state statutes that bring these mandates on is that you will not consider transportation impacts as part of reviewing them. So goal 12 shall not apply to these amendments. So goal 11 and goal 12 don't apply because these are mandates. And then all of the other goals don't apply. Although I really wish coastal shorelands did. That would be nice, beachfront property. That brings us to the next criteria, which would be section 16.542.040.b, compliance with the applicable policies in the comprehensive plan. There's only one policy in the comp plan that actually applies to this type of housing amendment. That would be Housing Policy 1, which is that the city shall revise zoning and subdivision ordinances to include innovative land development techniques and incentives to provide a range of housing types and densities and price ranges that shall adequately meet the present and future needs of our community. This amendment, while a lot of the new uses are mandated uses, will provide an increase in housing choices in all of the residential zones. So it may be the innovative, we could question that because it's a state mandate, but it will provide various housing options that don't exist. And I've tried to incorporate it following best planning practices. So the commission found that these revisions to the zoning ordinance will be as innovative as possible and will encourage the development of a wide range of dwelling types, therefore fulfilling policy 1. The next two criteria both don't apply. That would be 16.542.040.c and point D. They don't apply because these are mostly for rezones or for annexations and things like that. These sort of read that, hey, the proposed use that you're creating is going to cause a conflict, and that the public facilities necessary to support the proposed use that you're creating or changing to are appropriate. We're not changing anybody's use. We're not changing any zones. These two don't apply. These are more for the legislative zoning map amendments to the comp plan. Comp plan map amendments. They're not zone map amendments. We have 2 maps. It's pretty fun. The final one would be section 16.542.040.e, compliance with all Oregon administrative rules. There are 2 sections of Oregon administrative rule which may apply specifically to these amendments. The first is chapter 660 division 18, and the second is chapter 660 division 46. Chapter 660 overall would apply in general. These are just the divisions that are most critical. The first one is fulfilled by us doing our notice, that PAPA notice. That's the division that says this is how we do the land use planning, and we have done the land use planning. And then the next one is about middle housing in medium-sized cities. So Sheridan is not classified as a medium-sized city, classified as a small city. Rulemaking has not occurred for the state statute that has added this middle housing in medium-sized cities to small cities. And what the state has said is they basically pointed us towards the existing rules for middle cities and said, these rules will apply as soon as we can get around to doing rulemaking. So this is how we're gonna interpret it. So you better follow these rules, because once the rules are set, this is what they're gonna be based on. So we have designed these amendments in accordance with those rules. And that's sort of what we went over last time with the PowerPoint and all the pictures of the pretty duplexes and the lots being split apart and all that groovy stuff. In conclusion, based on those 5 criteria, of which only 3 are applicable to this amendment, the Planning Commission concluded that the application met every element, every criterion necessary for approval as set forth in Sheridan Development Code 16.542 Comprehensive Plan Text and Map Amendment and Development Code Text and Map Amendment Application Legislative. We should really just shorten that to legislative at some point. That's the technical stuff, but we want to go over what's the meat and potatoes. And I'm going to try and promise that I'm going to give the KISS version, the Keep It Simple Stupid or Keep It Stupid Simple version. And then if we have questions after that, we can go in and look at things under a microscope if we need to. So the general overview is that duplexes will be permitted in all zones, and all of the design requirements that apply to single family will now apply to duplexes. That means that there's no discrimination in lot size between single family and duplex, no discrimination in parking requirement between a single family dwelling and a duplex, and there's going to be no difference in design standards, but we're actually going to get rid of our design standards overall. The next issue is because we're reducing the minimum lot size for duplexes, we are also going to reduce the minimum lot size for townhomes. We already permit townhomes or attached single unit dwellings in our medium and high density zone. Right now, they're designed so that they match duplexes. I showed you all the graphics of how they match out the last time we presented. If we change the duplex standard, townhomes no longer match the duplexes. And there's a state provision that they like to call the MHLD, Missing Housing Land Division in ORS, that lets people, if they design their duplex or fourplex or triplex in such a way that it could meet the building code for an attached single unit dwelling, well, heck, after they build, they can partition it out as that regardless of what the city ordinances are. So we might as well give people the option to do it up front if we already permit that use instead of having to make folks do a complex development workaround. It's going to cost them more money and probably lead to utility conflicts that are going to be a pain to resolve. It's easier to just have them do 4 water meters than build a fourplex with a master meter and then have them redo each dwelling unit as they partition. We also discussed making ADUs slightly larger to match some freely available plans. Council pushed for that size to be pushed to an even larger size. Staff proposed 900 square feet as the new cap for ADUs to the Planning Commission, and we'll talk about that when we get to the ADU criteria. For those who might need a jog, an ADU is an accessory dwelling unit, which is either an attached or detached part of a house that basically is its own dwelling unit on the property that's supposed to be smaller and subsidiary to a single unit dwelling. We will talk more about that when we get into the code criteria, and we can get more council feedback on those volumes at that time. We're also going to change the structure of the code a little bit. This code hasn't gone through a really big quality of life update since the omnibus code was put together. And even then, that effort was mostly about making sure everything that was in the development ordinance survived to the omnibus update. It wasn't about quality of life and readability. Because of that, you're going to notice that there's more blue text in the packet than yellow text.
We like that.
Blue text is I'm getting rid of stuff. Yellow text is I'm adding stuff, right? So we're simplifying, we're adding an omnibus use table, and then for all of the residential zones, we're adding a table to show people, hey, this is the permitted uses in this zone, this is their densities, this is the amount of dwelling units you can have, and it'll all be easier to read for, not necessarily for a land use planner. I love the way the code's written, it's fun and weird, but for the layperson, they don't have to come to me and be like, hey, am I allowed to do this? And I have to scroll through 3 different chapters to figure it all out. It'll all be clear for them. There's some other minor quality of life updates. ADUs are going to get their own section. The marijuana facility regulation, that's going to get its own section. The rules aren't changing really around many of those things. They just used to be defined in each zone. So we would define them 3 times. So like 1, 2, here's ADUs in the R1 zone, then ADUs in the R2 zone, then ADUs in the R3 zone. With the same language every time. And that creates a problem with the digital code. So most people who interact with our code today don't come to the office and flip through a paper code book. They go online and they search it. And if you have ADUs in every single zone in every single section, you get 8, 10, 12 queries that come back, or responses to your query. And by reducing it to one section, you're only gonna get 3 responses to that query, and they're all gonna take someone to the same section of the code so they can actually understand what the requirements are. So quality of life updates were a big part of this code amendment. It's one of the reasons it's so long. We're going to be permitting a new use called SROs, single room occupancies. We've talked a little bit about this. The way I've structured the code amendment, I split them into 2 classes. Big ones, which we're just going to call single room occupancy dwellings, and small ones, which we're going to call boarding houses. And the whole point of the single room occupancy is it's an apartment, except you might share cooking facilities, you might share a bathroom with a neighbor, and your dwelling unit is designed for one individual. There's going to be different standards around those different size categories, and those are relating to a different state mandate, where the small ones have to match single unit, and the big ones can match multi-unit. But you can think about the big ones as being like a hotel or like a dorm. These things often support worker housing and things like that. The smaller ones are more like if you've ever rented out a room in your friend's house when you were at school, or if you've ever had a family member live with you who had a separated space. Those are more like the small ones, and we're going to call that a boarding house. We didn't use the definition in our code, so it was a clean break. And finally, the other big thing is we got rid of our residential design standards. So we didn't have any real residential design standards. We didn't have anything like, hey, you have to have your facade done like this. We had the architectural pick 3. And I'm not gonna lie, it's a personal pet peeve of mine while reviewing plans. And the way the architectural pick 3 works is instead of saying, hey, you have to do these things, he said, here's a bunch of lists of things that we thought were pretty at one point in time. Do any 3 of them. Well, sometimes you can do 3 of those things together and they don't get you a better product. And they end up just making reviews take longer. They end up making me review the architectural part of the plans, which is not my job. My job is to make sure that the land uses are compliant, right? It's not to judge someone's architectural drawings. And they just are kind of arbitrary. They don't actually get us a better design. It's not that we don't potentially need some facade standards or design standards in certain neighborhoods or zones, and these are things that can be considered by the council in a future date, especially depending on if we want like a historic Main Street in our downtown or something like that. But those standards should be well thought out. The architectural pick 2, pick 3 is sort of, it's like playing darts with your design standards, is the way that I would imagine. This takes it out of the code. We took it out for single family dwellings, we took it out for duplexes, we took it out for ADUs, and weirdly, we didn't have the standards for multifamily. So we only apply these to single family dwellings. So we're kind of cleaning it up, making it simpler. So that's the big overview. There's a couple of pages that I want to call out, and I'm going to use the packet page numbers at the top. I give all my documents page numbers, so there's a couple of different page numbers running around. But first, if you turn to packet page 17, this is a really good example of sort of the overarching tables that we've added to each residential zone. And I'll kind of go through all of them. It's the easiest way to look at the changes. So you can see that in the R1 zone, 2-unit dwellings have been added as a new use. So 2-unit dwellings are a new use, and they're going to be at 7,000 square feet of minimum lot area, which is the same as the single-unit dwelling detached. Boarding houses are a new use, and they're going to have the same lot area. The R1 zone is going to be really clean. Everything's at 7,000 square feet. One thing that staff did change in between the last version and this version is we added specific setbacks for accessory structures. And we've run into this problem where the code is sometimes very clear about residential structures and non-residential structures, but it wasn't very clear about accessory structures, so we wanted to clarify it. This is the only zone where we made the setbacks for the accessory structure just a little bit milder than the setbacks for the primary structure. Notice the side yard setback is 7 for residential structures. That's the current setback. There's no change to the standard. We set accessory structures to a side yard setback of 5 feet. The idea being that an accessory shed or those are the most common accessory structures. Sheds, small shops, those kinds of things are more appropriate near a property line potentially than a dwelling unit in a low density zone, right? Frankly, a lot of people want to build those right up against their fence line. So this is a really good kind of sample version of the omnibus table, but there's not a lot of fancy stuff going on here. If we go over to page 19 of the packet, you'll see that we changed that accessory structure. We have a kind of a two-tiered review system for accessory structures right now under the development code. If your accessory structure is less than 450 square feet, you are permitted by right. You can have your accessory structure, no problem, just a regular building permit. Right now, it's set that any accessory structure over 450 square feet, which is about, if you want to do a 2 or 3 bay shop, you're hitting over 450 square feet. You don't need to just pull a building permit, you need a conditional use permit. And for something that's a permitted use of the underlying zone for a square footage that small, that's pretty burdensome. In my first year as your land use planner, that was one of the most common questions I got is, hey, can I build a 3 bay shop? Can I build a 2 bay shop? And I tell people, oh, it has to be under 450 square feet, or you're gonna have to do a conditional use permit. And the planning commission has never denied one of those conditional use permits for a big shop. So raising this limit to 900 also lets us raise the ADU limit to 900. So we're making it all match and be even. So the ADU limit will raise to 900. The accessory building you can build without needing conditional use will also raise to 900. And this is going to be reflected in every single residential zone. So it's just going to make it easier. But then if you still want to do a really big accessory structure, something huge that could be almost commercial, you're going to need to get the conditional use permit. So now you can have a 3 bay shop by right. We're expanding those uses. You can have a larger ADU by right. So I gotta go to my own cheat sheet. The next page that I want to put attention on, and if folks have questions about pages we're not covering in depth, that is A-okay, we can go over them later, would be packet page 24. And I want to go to this one because here's the table in our R2 zone. And the R2 and R3 zone are basically the same zone for residential in Sheridan. The R3, we call the R3 the high density zone and R2 the medium density zone, but they actually permit dwelling units at the same density. R3 just allows commercial uses as well. So this is going to look really similar. So the first thing is we reduced the single unit attached or townhome dwelling to 2,500 square feet. So that 2 townhomes can fit in the exact same space as 1 duplex. That way, both options are even. I presented the council with a few different ways it could be interpreted, whether you want to have it favor long blocks of townhomes, whether you want it to be sort of the way that they currently are, where the outside unit has a bigger requirement, the inside unit has a lower requirement. And this is sort of the middle ground of you just make it all the same, and then developers can figure it out. Right? This is the easiest way for someone to understand, and it makes the math add up really easily. There's other ways to do the math. This is just a straightforward way. See that we added boarding house, single room occupancy, which is a little different. That's the bigger one. And again, those setbacks for accessory structures. A column that I have added in between the last time you saw these is the minimum number of dwelling units. So that really says a 2-unit dwelling has 2 minimum dwelling units, a single unit dwelling has 1 dwelling unit, a single unit detached dwelling has 1 dwelling unit. That makes perfect sense. That's the definition of all those units. Liam, why did you include that? That seems kind of obvious. The way that our code works for multifamily dwellings is that they have a minimum lot size based on a minimum number of dwelling units, and then the lot size increases at a lower rate for each additional dwelling. So the minimum lot size is 9,000 square feet for a multi-unit building. That's 3 dwelling units. But each of those 3 dwelling units basically has 3,000 square feet minimum. But then each dwelling unit after that is 2,000. So wording it this way means that I don't have to write for the first 3 dwelling units, it's 9,000 square feet, and then it is 2,000 square feet for each dwelling unit after that. You can just say the minimum is 3 dwelling units, the minimum lot size is 9,000. For each dwelling unit above 3, it's 2,000. So it's a really easy way to communicate the requirement. The other reason that it's useful is that the single room occupancies that aren't boarding houses, they have to match the design and density standards of multifamily at a minimum. But the state requires us to begin the definition of a single room occupancy at 4. So what I did to match the density standard is, okay, 4 for multifamily is 9,000 plus 2,000, so that's 11,000. So they have to start at 11,000. Then we want every unit after that to have 2,000. So this is a really easy way of restating that requirement. Your minimum dwelling units are 4, and your minimum lot size is 11,000. And then for each dwelling unit above 4, you have to add 2,000. And that makes it exactly the same as multifamily, which is what was recommended by Council and Planning Commission. So I know it's adding an extra column, but the extra column adds a lot of clarity and makes me not have to write 17 different footnotes for every single different one of these standards without changing the way the current code reads. So the footnotes here are pretty much just how the current code reads with weird exceptions. The next page to take a look at would be, we're gonna skip quite a bit ahead because there's nothing you haven't really seen. Our code likes to be repetitive, which is both a blessing and a curse. For me, it's a blessing. I know it says the same thing. So that would be to page 36 of the packet. This is going to be the table for the R3 zone. And again, it's pretty much the same exact table as under the last zone, except we're adding commercial uses. And currently the code does not allow mixed-use buildings in the mixed-use zone. We talked about how that's kind of goofy. It's the mixed-use zone. You should be able to have a mixed-use building. And both Planning Commission and Council didn't seem to have any issue with us adding that in there. How I handled that in this case is, one, in the permitted uses table, the master table, mixed-use buildings are now allowed by right in R3. It says, hey, you can have a mixed-use building. You can have a storefront and you can live above it. You can have a storefront, you can live behind it, right? You can do that in the R3 zone. That's the purpose of this zone. Let people do what the zone is built for, right? However, it gets a little weird when you get to lot size requirements. So commercial uses in the commercial zone don't really have a lot size requirement. It's whatever you need because you're in the commercial zone. Lots can be weird. But in a residential zone, we have stricter minimum lot sizes. So in this case, we've made the minimum lot size, we've clarified that it's 5,000 square feet for a commercial use, which is what it was implied. You'll notice under the minimum number of dwelling units, it says NA, and then there's a footnote. If you follow that footnote, it reads as follows. There is no additional lot area required to establish a dwelling unit in a building with a permitted commercial use. Each building shall be allowed a maximum of 1 dwelling unit per established commercial use. So for every story you have in your building, you get one dwelling unit you can establish. Currently, that's the standard in the commercial zone. We propose doubling the amount in the commercial zone. So right now, we would say, okay, you have one commercial use, you get 1 residential use in the R3 zone. Mixed use, Main Street kind of vibe is the idea. In the commercial zone, most of the existing buildings already have 2 dwelling uses, or 2 dwelling units per commercial use, the one that have dwelling units above. They're at a higher ratio, and they already exist at that higher ratio. And the times that things have been approved recently, they've been approved with variances to grant them a higher ratio. So in order to make things consistent with what's built on the ground and with future development opportunities for some of the redevelopment in our downtown, we propose going from 1 commercial use to 1 dwelling unit to 1 commercial use to 2 dwelling units in the commercial zone. And you'll see that change. I didn't add one of the fancy tables for the commercial zone. Sorry, its time hasn't come yet. It will come. But you can see that change on page 48 of the packet in the commercial zone. We've rewritten the way that it talks about minimum lot area. So like I said before, in the commercial zone, minimum lot area, no limitation. Minimum lot area.
Should I ask my question later?
Possible, yes. You can write them down,
Yep.
hold them,
Yep.
that'd be great.
Yep.
And then there's no additional lot area required to establish a dwelling unit in a building with a permitted commercial use. Each building shall be allowed a maximum of 2 dwelling units per established commercial use. And this is pretty much the only way to get dwelling units by right in our commercial zone at this time. The next things that I want to talk about just very quickly, I'm going to skip the urban transition zone. The urban transition zone is our other residential zone. There's like 3 properties in it, and they're barely in the city limits. I'm sorry, Liz, I know you can't see the map. It's this little thin green line right on the edge of town. We made all the amendments to the urban transition zone as required, but the minimum lot size is like multiple acres, so not super concerned about the urban transition zone in Sheridan. We don't have a lot of properties with that zone. They're right there. So I'm gonna skip over that. Let's go to page 61 in the packet, which is parking. So generally we have kept the minimum parking requirement where it is. We haven't really moved the needle on any of these requirements. Single unit dwellings will still require 2 spaces. 2 unit dwellings are no longer considered multi-unit dwellings. That's one of those big state amendments, right? So we also have to keep them at 2 spaces. So it'll be 2 spaces per duplex, 2 spaces for single family. For both of those developments, we're still not counting garages. Your garage does not count as a parking space in the city of Sheridan. An attached garage is not a parking space. For multi-unit, we're keeping it at 1.5 spaces per dwelling unit, no change. For single unit attached dwellings, what we discussed before and presented to council was still keeping the requirement at 2 spaces, but allowing the garage to count for up to half of the spaces. And that's because single unit attached dwellings are often narrower, they often have a smaller 1-car garage, and they're often designed with the intent that that garage not be storage space, that it be minimal and it's designed really for the vehicle. So in this case, you think of 4 townhomes, right? They may all have a carport or garage out front, and that carport or garage is really intended for parking a car in. These are not dwelling units for people who are accumulating stuff so much. But also, this brings them sort of in a midway point between apartments and single family, right? Where single family needs 2, apartment needs 1.5. Townhomes would still need 2, but you can accommodate 1 in a garage. So it kind of keeps them where as a hybrid use, with sort of a hybrid of parking, which is what they're intended for. And of course, this allows them to be built on smaller lots. If you still require 2 parking spaces, and it's a 2,500 square foot narrow lot, which they're allowed to be on, you might not be able to accommodate that, right? It just might not be physically possible. There's a couple reasons why this exemption was baked in. And the next thing is single room occupancy dwellings. The only difference in standard, and there haven't been any rules made, so this might be a bold choice. But we have proposed making this parking standard 1 space per dwelling unit for single room occupancy compared to 1.5 for a regular multifamily. And the reason is each single room occupancy should be designed only to house 1 person or 1 couple. It really is not designed for large families. Again, these are often a form of workforce housing or student housing. It's the most common use. And the idea being if you have a dwelling unit, a apartment complex, you might have some that are 2 units, 2 bedrooms, some that are 3, some that are 1. Some people may be single, some maybe a couple with 2 cars, it might be a family with 3 cars, and so having the 1.5 sort of bakes in a little bit of extra parking. But if somebody were to develop a single room occupancy, it would be 1 person per bed, 1 person per unit. And the expectation that somebody in a single room occupancy is gonna bring 3 or 4 vehicles, you can sort of reduce that parking minimum. If somebody were to build a single room occupancy, they could provide 7 spaces per unit if they wanted to. This is just setting that minimum. Not to approve things on the principle of what could go wrong, but we do not expect to see dedicated single room occupancy development take off in Sheridan. We expect it, if it happens at all, to happen on that smaller scale, or to be kind of traditional residential home development, such as care facilities or retirement homes, right? Those are more typical, and those also still usually have a lower parking requirement. Other than parking, the last page I want to bring some attention to is going to be packet page 69. And that's because this is where we're giving ADUs their own section. Accessory dwelling units are gonna live on their own, it'll be easy to query, easy to get information on. And we've removed the design standards for ADUs, and we've upped the minimum, the maximum area of an ADU to 900 square feet of gross floor area, or 50% of the primary dwelling unit, whichever is lower. So if your dwelling unit is 1,800 square feet gross floor area, you can have a 900 square foot ADU. If your dwelling unit is 900 square feet gross floor area, you're down to a 450 square foot ADU. So it's based off of keeping scale with the dwelling unit. That 50% number is pliable. We don't necessarily want to set it too high because Sheridan has a lot of older lots. It has a lot of older lots that don't meet our current low density standards with smaller dwelling units on them. And the point of the ADU is so that you can encourage density without changing neighborhood massing, right? Without changing the scope, shape, dimensions, and parking needs of a neighborhood, right? So if you've got a 4,300 square foot lot, we've got some 4,300 square foot lots in Sheridan, and you've already got a 1,200 square foot home on that. If you were to then build an 800 square foot ADU, you're sort of approaching densities that are supposed to be in the R2 zone. If you build, you've got your 1,200 square foot house, you build a 500 square foot ADU on your smaller lot, you're sort of still in scale with your neighborhood and able to increase the density of your lot. So that's why cities set those percentile caps. Again, both of these numbers, this is, I would say, our most pliable numbers. This is completely voluntary. If we want to set the numbers higher, they can be set higher. That 50%, I wouldn't push it too much, but there are cities that go up to 70 or even 80%, depending on the city's desires and needs. So, based off of our development history, I think no higher than 65, but 50 is a pretty reasonable starting point. And that is my broad overview of the code amendments. And with the overview of the code amendments and the reading of the criteria, the Planning Commission recommended that the City Council approve these proposed amendments to the Sheridan Development Code with no changes. And I conclude the staff report.
Okay, are there any questions of staff from the council before we continue and accept public testimony? I do. So with parking, so I was looking at you know the parking requirements and thinking about what we currently have commercially. So for example, the Hyder has 4 commercial spaces, and I don't even know technically how many residential spaces on top they have. But anyways, with a scenario like that, if a retail, you know, store on, say, on the Hyder, say they have one retail store, it's one space for 400 square feet, plus one space for 2 employees. I'm gonna assume those commercial spaces are a lot larger than 400 square feet. Does it increase, like say when it's 800 square feet, then it needs 2 spots dedicated? Yes. Okay, so if I'd have to look. I don't know if they're more than 1,000 square feet, but let's pretend that we've got 4 storefronts
That are each 800.
That are each 800.
Yeah.
So that's 2 parking spots.
8 parking spaces.
It's 4 that have to be dedicated, but then also if they only have 2 employees, then that's another 4. So that's 12 parking spots dedicated for the bottom row of the Hyder.
Yeah.
Where would that go?
So this is a really interesting question, and I'm really glad you asked it. So the first thing is, for existing structures, you have to treat parking differently. With a change of use, it becomes a different question. With the Hyder building specifically, the exact amount of parking that was needed is recorded in the decision which approved the remodel. And it's assuming, right, that the existing on-site parking and street parking, which has served that building for its entire history, will continue to serve the existing uses, but that each new dwelling unit had to provide the 1.5 parking spaces. They were all laid out in the plan. And if somebody were to, let's say, complete that remodel and have those dwelling units, we would not grant a certificate of occupancy until they had the new parking. The other thing that makes that complicated is we've got the only place in our code where the downtown is defined is in the parking section, where you are allowed to count on-street spaces as spaces that serve your building. Outside of this block, and it's not quite what I think most people would actually define downtown as, but outside of this description, you'd have to provide them all on site. But downtown businesses, because of their privilege of being downtown, do have more lenient parking standards. So both of those things are kind of how we approach it. If we wanted to talk about the big P question, right, that looms over every city's head, there's a lot we could discuss about parking. It's outside of the scope of these amendments. There are some different philosophical approaches about how you regulate parking. There's the question of what does council want, what does the community want in terms of minimum parking requirements. There's questions surrounding best planning practices, and there's questions around like what is the opinion of the person who's writing your parking code, right? We haven't done a parking study. We're looking at doing some preliminary, very preliminary, not any use studies, just a capacity analysis, maybe as part of our TSP, maybe. That's if there's money for it. And that would kind of tell us what our existing parking capacity is in downtown. But yeah, I mean, this is something I would love to talk about with the council and I'm prepared to talk about. I don't know if we have the capacity to do that today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, okay, one other, I guess, follow-up, at least while we're talking about the hyder, is with those residential spaces, they would be considered multi-unit?
Yep.
Is that right?
They're
What is-
multi-unit.
Okay, because they have more than one
Yep.
bedroom?
They have more than one, so anytime you're building more than 3 units in our code, you're immediately considered multi-unit. The proposal for them specifically was 8. That was amended later to add 1 ground floor unit, so it went to 9. So it is considered a multi-unit development.
Okay.
If somebody were to build 2 units above a store, we would still consider it multi-unit because in order to be a duplex or a single unit dwelling, you have to be detached and on your own lot, and that's in their definition. So even if I were to build 1 dwelling unit above my store, I'm opting into the multi-unit parking standard, which actually means that if I have a store, I'm providing parking for my store, which theoretically is for my customers and for my employees and myself, and I live above my store, I'm only going to be adding 1.5 spaces onto my parking burden. Now we do round up, so it becomes 2, but it gets a little weird, right? But they would be multi-unit.
Okay, so I have a similar question with the Huntley then too, because if they have a restaurant in there, it looks like it's dependent on the size of tables or how much seating they have in there. And if we're counting on-street parking, I don't know how far we can go, but there's not much on-street directly in front.
Yeah.
So without dedicated parking for that, I don't know how big of a restaurant they could fit in it, because the building's quite large, but.
So it does depend on whether something is a new use or a change in use. And I'm not 100% sure what the last use of the Huntley building was. I know at some point, I think there was a food service in there.
Pizza.
Yeah,
And
that was the last use.
And I believe it was the last use, and therefore there would be no change in use. We don't apply the development criteria unless there's a change in use.
Okay, so if somebody buys it and wants to put a restaurant.
They can do that. They don't have to worry about parking. They wouldn't have to worry about a new development code criteria. As soon as they go to put a dwelling unit above their restaurant, they'd have to provide parking for their dwelling unit.
But not the restaurant?
Not the restaurant.
Okay.
And we likely wouldn't apply the off-street parking because the assumption would be this building has been here forever, it's already being served by its off-street parking, but you're increasing the need in capacity, right? So you're gonna have to add the 1.5 spaces. We get some leniency with how we interpret that downtown parking zone. And if we were gonna have a larger conversation about parking, I would love to talk about that downtown parking district. Like I have parking opinions, and I'm not sure that everybody's gonna wanna hear them, but I have them. So maybe we'll say that for another day.
Okay. All right, thank you. Yeah, those were my main questions. Anybody else have questions?
Like,
There's a lot of stuff covered here. Ian? Oh, Jim?
I'm almost exhausted from listening to all this, but I had to ask this question 1.5 spaces. Now, you just said you round up to 2. 1.5, it's the same thing if you say 2. Why do you have 1.5?
Because if you have 2 units, that would be 6. If you had 3 units, that would be 8. If you had 4 units, it's not. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, so what I was doing in my head is, okay, if you've got a duplex, they get 3 parking spaces, if I got that right.
They get 2. A duplex on its own lot, independent, gets 2.
Okay, so if you've got a triplex.
Yeah.
They're gonna get 4, did I do that right?
No, they're gonna get 5. So we want
Five, not 6.
Yeah, no, whatever, I get it, so that, this
So-
1.5 is designed to keep you from having to have way more.
Yeah, too many. Some codes get really detailed and will be like, hey, if you're building a 1-bedroom apartment, it's 1, and a 2-bedroom apartment is 1.25, and a 3-bedroom apartment is 1.75. Keeping it all at the same standard just makes the math easy when someone comes in to build, and generally will assume providing that part.
So we're not requiring these people in multi-units to, get a smart car so they'll fit into half a parking.
No, exactly. Yeah. We're never going to create half a space. So if we end up with that half number sitting on the end, it rounds up. And the code is clear that that's how we're supposed to interpret it. That's not a staff interpretation.
Okay, got it, thank you.
Again,
Page 17 of the packet, under accessory structures, you have the side yard 5 feet. Is that from the edge of the roof line, and does that include carports?
So it would include carports. It would include detached carports, not attached. They would be anything that's attached to the main dwelling unit counts as part of the dwelling unit, right? And since I've been your land use planner, I've been measuring from the bottom wall, not from the eaves. Our code is less clear about where that begins, so I've chosen the more generous interpretation. The eaves your eaves coming over does not like intrude into your neighbor's property, or obviously you can't build across the property line, right? So you can't do that. It doesn't change your ability to serve as a fire break from the air, right? So I've chosen the more generous interpretation in the plan site. Which is also, granted, the more generous interpretation is also the faster one, and the one that gets plans reviewed quicker.
On page 36 of the packet, R3 dimensional standards, do we know what the average lot size is in the city?
I don't have the average lot size off the top of my head. I could get it calculated for you.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I got a couple other just quick ones here.
Yeah, no worries.
I didn't write a note on that one, so you get away with that. These are mostly just clarifications for me.
No worries.
But also on the ADU,
Mhm.
if I remember correctly, the council directed 900 square feet as being the minimum to start at to send back to the planning commission. So, is the plan, by saying 900, is the planning commission saying, yeah, 900, come on guys, or what are they trying to say to us?
So they didn't discuss it as much as they did last time,
Okay.
and I don't want to interpret words that they didn't say. It seemed like they were okay with 900, but some of the commissioners actually listened to the council meeting and tuned in, and I think they were more like, all right, 900 is fine. That's an impression. They basically read the change and adopted it. There was very minimal conversation.
Okay, and then I guess my final question would be about the 50% for ADUs.
Yeah.
It seems like that should not be based on the lot, on the size of the primary dwelling. I mean, maybe to some extent, but maybe more tied to the lot size. Because if I have a 900 square foot house, and if I might want to build another one right next to it.
And I think that I haven't seen one standard tied to lot size. I've seen cities that wanted to encourage that really push the percentage, push it to closer to 75. I mean, Salem's is absurdly high, particularly, and I know Max is also relatively high. Some cities also allow the ADUs to go up to 1,000 square feet. That's not uncommon. Larger than 1,000 is a little uncommon, but it exists. These are all numbers to which you have play. In terms of best planning practices, 50% is a common pick, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's the most logical. What would restrict based on size is, of course, setbacks, which already exist, and the accessory setbacks will apply to the ADU. So they're gonna get a little bit of a bump to the side setback in the low density zone by being an accessory structure, not a primary structure. They're forced to be set back by the facade of the house. That's a previous ADU rule. It's generally good practice to want the ADU not in the front yard. But again, some cities have removed that requirement and had no problem. So I would say a lot of these are policy decisions, and
The side facing yard one is the hard one for me, if you're on a corner, because it's kind of
it
like,
does become difficult on corner lots.
it's kind of weird.
And because we have such nice gridded streets in some of our older neighborhoods and such short block lengths, we have a lot of corner lots. And I think that a lot of this is policy. I mostly kept the requirements that were from the previous ADU code and didn't try and play with them that much. If council wanted a version of this where ADUs were allowed inside exterior yards or had different setbacks, or were allowed at up to 65, 75% of the dwelling unit size or 1,000 square feet, do I think that that would lead to an ADU apocalypse that would take over Sheridan? No, not at all. I think that a few people would take advantage of it, absolutely. I think it's more policy than best practice at that point.
Liam, Ian, can I ask real quick? So with something like that, so say somebody did want to build something larger, can they do a conditional use or can they petition or anything like that? So just basically, no, you can't.
That becomes really challenging. Again, they could submit a variance application. It's standard that can be varied.
Okay.
However, if you read the way variances are written in our code, it would be almost impossible to improve that variance. If I got it's not like something like a fence height or a 1 foot setback variance because your lot is oddly shaped, or a variance for an existing structure that you kind of got a weird configuration because you're a historic lot. We see these all over Sheridan. Those are pretty easy to grant. In this case, it would be a variance that's very difficult to grant because it would not be a result of a hardship. It would just be, I want a bigger one. And that becomes a really hard criteria. So if council wanted there to be an option where you could go above 50% with a conditional use permit, we would have to write that in there. We would have to say, or up to 75% with conditional use, and then we would have to design conditional use criteria around what does that 75% get you. So there is a lot of play. I don't think we really have the capacity doing these amendments to make that play, but it's policy, not best practice.
That was my question. Ian, do you have anything else?
I would just say that my thoughts are that with odd sized lots and historically small homes for a historic place, I could think of many properties along the edge of the city that have tiny homes, essentially, with a lot of property. And I'm thinking about those folks who are gonna want to be able to apply for those variances, especially. So I would be more comfortable with a larger variance. I don't know how the council feels, but, or possibilities to apply for those variances.
I think that the best approach for that would be to write in specific language around conditional use. So to allow that criteria to be waived within a certain amount as a conditional use application.
That's what I was saying.
Exactly, and we've actually had a similar case. Flag lots are a nightmare for ADUs because flag lots are oddly dimensioned, and the legal front line may not actually be how the house is oriented, and that can create a lot of problems. So definitely I can see it would be about, if this is an amendment that you would consider making, I think it's very supportable. I'd say probably be about an hour of staff time to come up with something and have it be reviewed, and it could be adopted as part of your approval of this. What I would maybe suggest is any of those criteria can be removed if there's a conditional use permit, and then they have either they can demonstrate some odd dimension on their lot, or maybe exemplary design of their ADU. Just some thoughts thrown out there.
I like that one.
Yeah.
So that's something that, if this is, approved, that can be added. later, or are you saying we need to amend the motion?
If you did a motion where you said the more specific we can get tonight, the better, right? But I understand that this is sort of a concept that is nascent in council's thought. We could kick it to another code amendment and have it go through a more rigorous process. You could give me some really clear language, and you'd get something really clear, and we wouldn't have any issues. You could amend it with some softer language and say we want to allow larger ADUs or ADUs inside exterior setbacks with a conditional use permit with criteria to be determined by staff. Maybe that's language I should write down. Yeah. But something like that, I could put something together and include it in the ordinance, and you would see it at the reading.
Okay, so we could still approve this, and then you could do that
Yeah.
language.
Yeah.
And then when we approve the ordinance, then basically what we just talked about would be incorporated into this.
Yes.
Okay.
But it's gonna need to be clear in the motion. It's definitely not gonna be as Liam just said. Make it clear.
So this motion needs to be clear
Yeah.
as far as what to
As
direct
far as
you to do.
yeah, at least some general parameters. I mean, I could really get into the guts of that ADU code, but I tried to stay out of it.
Kai or Tyler, do you see any issues with, giving slightly larger ADU sizes than what's in this?
My only thought, and it's not a legal thought, it's not an illegal thought either.
Welcome to the council.
I see the accessory dwelling units as intended to be subsidiary to a main house. And we don't want to have a 100-year-old tiny home with also a brand new tiny home that's only a tiny bit smaller. That we're saying, oh, this is actually an accessory dwelling unit when, we could theoretically get close.
With a conditional use permit, we could say, no, you need to keep it 50%, is I think what Liam said, right?
Well,
So if
then
you
we
go-
wouldn't need a conditional use, because that's the rule.
Well, I mean, if they wanna go 75%, they would have to get a conditional use. If they kept it to 50, they could do that.
Right. I don't like the variant, my recommendation would be not to implement the conditional use process. But I think Liam could craft it well. And that's a policy preference, not legal.
And it likely wouldn't be very utilized. As soon as you put a barrier in front of something, you give somebody a clear path. They're usually take a clear path over the complicated path.
Kai, anything before I call it Lizzie?
No, I mean, my thoughts always go to parking, utilities, access. And as far as emergency response, we know all that gets approved anyway through the process, so I don't see any reasons glaringly not for there to be a variance.
Right, Lizzie?
Has cottage clusters been explored at all?
I did not have enough time and money to do cottage clusters. Lucy, I would love to write you a cottage cluster code. Don't get me wrong, but it would not be cheap. That's the reality. A thoughtful cottage cluster code takes a long time. When we were scoping the amendments, we thought about, do we even bring this up? And the truth is it would kind of have to be its own thing. And in terms of cost to the city, is staff time of designing that amendment in a way that's thoughtful and incorporates the needs of the city of Sheridan, it would be pretty expensive and outside scope. So that's why it's not in here. Although, if I had direction and budget to write cottage cluster code to bring before y'all, I would absolutely bring cottage cluster code before y'all.
So if somebody came in and wanted to develop a piece of property and they went by McMinnville's amendment code and brought that as a rough guideline, is that something that you could look at and possibly keep, the expenses down, because just use that format? Of course, we're not that big, so bring it down, but at least it has some kind of a formation.
What I'll say about things like cottage clusters is I've seen other than just following the state minimums, the codes vary wildly. And you wanna make sure that you're incentivizing the things with cottage clusters that are important to your community. You want it to be really reflexive. So for example, if the primary desire for cottage clusters is for workforce housing, for teachers, you might wanna write the standards very differently than if the primary goal of your cottage cluster is for families.
Can you explain a little bit in case somebody here doesn't know cottage cluster, please?
Yeah, so a cottage cluster is a variant form of multifamily development. There are actually a lot of examples in Salem of historic ones. The next time you're in downtown Salem, go to Cottage Street, you can see some old cottage clusters. The idea is that there will be multiple detached, small, stick-built buildings of a similar style that are clustered together. They would have shared facilities, usually shared parking. They're usually rental housing, and they're built around an open courtyard. And that courtyard often contains shared services, whether that's shared accessory buildings, shared commercial kitchen, shared community garden, shared amphitheater space. And what I was sort of getting at with the how do you want your cottage cluster code to read is you can do things where cottage clusters get a density bonus if they do the things that the city likes. So let's say it's very much favoring families is the goal for the cottage clusters. Well, hey, you can have it so if the shared amenities include a play space, an enclosed play space, or they include a tot loft or something like that, the cottage cluster gets a density or parking bonus. Versus if your goal is to create something for workforce housing, you might want to incentivize shared amenities like kitchens. You can have questions of if you're not doing state mandated cottage clusters, can you do a duplex cluster? The state mandate is not to do duplexes, so that a lot of questions come up, and we probably want to, even if we were using someone else's code as a model, run it through a full planning commission work session, try and drive community engagement, and do something that reflects what Sheridan needs in its multifamily housing.
Although I'm totally pro cottage cluster. I like cottage clusters.
I just call them bungalow villages. I think it's more fun.
Okay, any other questions before we move on? This? Okay, alright. I will now accept public testimony regarding the proposed legislative amendments. If you intend to present oral testimony, please fill out a request to speak slip. Please also clearly state your name and address when you are called to speak. This will help in preparing accurate written minutes for the hearing. If you have written testimony or other evidence to submit, please also give that to staff so it can be entered into the record. Your testimony shall be limited to 5 minutes. Okay, I don't think we have any. Would the council like staff to address any of the public testimony? We didn't have any. If there are no further questions from the council of either staff or the public testimony is now order. I will close the public hearing at 8:41 p.m. I will now entertain discussion of the application. So we kind of had a little bit of discussion about adding the language of the motion.
I suggest we approve it as presented with a
I can provide you language if you would like.
I don't think it's time to make a motion yet, but if you provide the language, you can write it down, and then when it's time to make a motion, you can do it. Does that work?
absolutely.
Okay. What is your B suggestion?
The motion would read, I move to adopt the planning commission order and findings of fact, and recommend the city council approve the amendments as prepared by staff with the additional direction to add a conditional use permit process to allow upward variance on ADU sizing.
And citing. Sizing and citing.
Citing.
Sizing and citing.
Okay.
Yeah, there we go. That solves the site transfer.
Okay, any other discussion about this before we move on to the next step, which would then be a motion? So, okay. All right. If there's no further council discussion, staff recommended that the council pass a motion adopting the planning commission order and recommending the city council approve the proposed amendments to the Sheridan Development Code. Now we can have a motion. Jim?
I move that we do what Tyler said.
I think you have to repeat it, right?
Would you be so kind as to repeat that, Tyler, so I can say
So moved.
that one?
Suggested motion, I move to adopt the planning commission order and findings of fact and recommend the city council approve the amendments as prepared by staff with the additional direction to add a conditional use permit process to allow upward variance on ADU sizing and siting.
As presented, that's why.
Not quite.
Second.
There we go.
Okay, first and second. All right, any more discussion on this? Okay, all right, I'll call for a vote then, all in favor? Okay, that looks unanimous, okay. Thank you to the members of the public who participated in the discussion this evening, that was nobody. Thank you, Lan, this was a lot of stuff and a lot of work.
A lot of work, seriously, what he's doing, yes.
Very nice job, Liam.
And I just wanna know, I have a cottage cluster presentation in the wings.
No.
Thank you for all the enthusiasm.
Okay,
Thank you.
You all need me for the rest of the evening?
I don't believe so, but thank you.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, okay, so, it's 8:45, we still have most of the meeting to go through. So, next up, we have the consent agenda. Jim,
I move we approve the consent agenda as presented.
second. Okay, any discussion? Jim?
I just have one question. I had several that I talked with Stacy about, but she explained why I was not getting it quite right, but I wanted to know what Turney Excavating Incorporated did for the city.
They did the downtown project.
That was the sidewalk with the, and have we accepted or approved their work?
Absolutely not.
Okay, because according to what I'm reading here, we've paid them, because these are supposed to have gone out, $93,780.67, and that's a whole bunch of money if we haven't even accepted their work.
Total cost is about 160, Jim.
So
And we have
basically,
retention held.
okay, so we basically have held off the remaining.
Absolutely, we have, I believe it's 5% retention, on the contract, possibly 10, I'd have to look,
It
but.
is, but I added to that.
Oh, did you? Okay, I know we have substantial retention aside.
I know council was concerned about that project, so I didn't sign their last pay request, their pay request number 3. You haven't seen it yet?
Yeah, I think we have it, but it's been
I sent it
held.
back, and
Okay.
asked for a reduced rate on the work performed that was questioned until we accepted.
Yeah, so we've made several payments, but retention's been held on each of them, and I will not pay until.
And we still have the retainage in
Yeah.
the contract as well.
The only question that I have.
Any other discussion on the, minutes or voucher directory? Okay, I'll go ahead and call for a vote then, all in favor? Okay, that's unanimous, okay, moving on to department reports, we have sheriff's report, I believe that's, anybody knows the page number before I go?
122.
Okay, 122. Okay, any questions or comments regarding this report? Yeah, Jim?
I just have one, this is real, no, but, okay, from the 1st of January to the 31st of January, that's year to date, same difference. They show, 11 other items that in their year to date column, which it match exactly, it says they had 12 other, and I just have to wonder what, typo, they had one other they didn't count in the 1 Jan to 31 Jan, it seemed odd, it doesn't matter, but it just seemed odd.
I wonder if it's because they processed it. Yeah, I wonder, like, maybe they ran it after
Yeah, I'm not sure.
January 31st, and so that incorporated some
Yeah,
February
it could
data.
have been like a February 1st one, I don't know, but it just seemed weird.
Yeah, and that's the only just like, numbers that don't match. That's interesting. Okay. Okay. Anybody have any other comments? Yeah, Jim.
And the other thing I saw that I liked was on the last page, 134, where you show the summary, they're working 63 street traffic stops, which I support wholeheartedly. I don't know why they stopped them, but I think that's great. Slow people down. That's all I got.
Any other comments? Okay, we'll move on then to Finance Director budget reports. She's not up there yet.
Jim.
Go ahead.
I'm here.
Okay, on page, I'll start with a specific page because I found it more than once. On page 135, which is the first page, it, as a non-finance person, it looks like the general fund revenue section isn't functioning correctly. Is that?
The general fund revenue is functioning correctly, not in our software yet.
Yeah.
So yes, the money is functioning, it is coming in. That is, I'd say, probably the last piece. As you look through this report, those accounts are starting to tie out like we've been working on. This is one of the very last ones. And this one looks terrible as we have a grant payment that was made, but the incoming cash has not been posted yet. So it's actually just a pass-through grant for that exact amount. And
So in your process,
yes,
our funds are working, but on the printout with our brand spanking new Tyler software, it's not quite caught up yet, is that?
it is still not. With audit and everything else, it's
I get it, and then but that
taking
also,
some time to get everything data entered.
that also applies to the sewer fund, the water fund, and the actually, yeah, the street fund, all the revenues and all those.
The revenues are the last piece to be put in,
Thank you.
unfortunately.
No, that's,
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
Jim, I just wanna say also is certain things that staff do, year to year are basically timed to where they don't overlap. And unfortunately, we had 3 overlaps because we weren't timely in our audit and we weren't timely in our financial revenue review with Steve Donovan and the audit. So all of those happened at the same time, which is really unusual.
Well, no, I'm not complaining
So
about.
staff is behind, it's costing the city extra money as well for the extra training of Tyler Tech. But
I'm not.
staff has done,
Yeah, I'm not
I
upset
think
by
a
that,
great
it's
job.
just that when you're looking through, you're going, wait, what? Zeros, what, that can't be right. So I understand, that's why I thought it was, it's a matter of getting Tyler to cross everything.
It looks like if you just look at expense total and ignore the line underneath it, then it's fine.
Yeah, the expenses are running pretty smooth through Tyler. That part is actually, I'd say, going really well overall as far as entering and check paying, things like that. The expense part, I think we finally got down. The revenues is that last bit, and I'm slowly getting the back months caught up and entered into Tyler.
I will say, it looks like we have, some activity in the ARPA funds. I think you mentioned earlier in your report how we got the speed signs. So we, are starting to use some of the ARPA money, so that's good. Jim, you got another?
Yeah, I got another question. And again, I understand that the funds stand on their own versus individual lines, but I noticed that, trying to accomplish instead of percent left, it's percent remaining, we're already, overdone in, rock and aggregate and postage and printing, I think is what I'm seeing there. And do we need to later on move some money around for that to make that work?
So specifically rock and aggregate, I believe are okay. There was a purchase made a while back, I think from Yamhill County, we bought like a large chunk from them, which actually I found out later on should have been coded somewhere else. It's been taken out of rock and aggregate, so once I do a journal entry to move that, it'll bring that line back up. We're fine on rock and aggregate right now, we're within budget. Postage, we are also in the middle of, since we've changed how we do the utility billing, all of that postage is now in-house. So you're going to see a monthly higher bill. We should still overall be within budget. The last time I looked, we were still within budget. And so if you're seeing a negative, I will pull that and look and see exactly what's going on in there. But you are gonna see a higher, I think it's gonna look higher monthly because of the amount of postage that we are pulling to make sure we can cover our utility bill and mail outs.
And then one final thing, as I'm looking through, right, I'm trying to graph these numbers, but, on page 137, under the, sewer department, expenses, the final line shows that, we're at 103.66%. How do we get above 100?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the other one right above that's 84.43, which is great. But the one below that says 103.66. You're going, wait, how does that?
Right, I like those lines.
I wonder if that has to do with just that bottom line is kind of messed up anyways.
It is, and that's going to change when those revenues are booked.
Okay, so this,
Because that's showing you the total between the revenue, the expenses, and then where we should be with no revenues booked at this point in this report. It is going to show you that.
and then, well, yeah, this is not a criticism of you at
No,
all,
you're fine.
but we're still working through Tyler. Is that the best way
We
to put
are,
it?
we are.
I understand that. I mean, working new software and then trying to fit in all the old numbers to the way we used to do it, and they don't fit anymore. I get it.
Tyler has been a learning experience. Tyler Tech, I apologize.
Oh, yeah.
I Tech.
I just want to mention, Jim, to your question, there will be a supplemental budget.
Okay, good.
Yes, that will be coming, not just on the rock and aggregate though.
Alright,
Kai, you mentioned that there was increased cost among staff to implement TITech. Were those not anticipated in the original adoption of, when the council adopted TITech?
No, unfortunately, the training wasn't completed in the window.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, any other questions for Stacy? Okay, alright, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And again, as I've heard, I invite anybody anytime to come in and we can go over some of this. So, anytime.
Oh, and thank you for responding to my email. It made perfect sense.
Absolutely, anytime.
Thank you, Stacy.
One last thing, just so you know, I hope the council noticed, as we do send out the AP vouchers now, you will be getting them via email. Again, audit this month has been a little bit crazy. We've had, they were here last week. This week is starting to push, like our added things to pull and send to them, so it's been a little crazy. AP vouchers, probably about one a week is our ultimate goal on running checks, and that way it gives you plenty of time to review those reports. So you will be getting them. You guys got 2 in 1. We'll try not to do that. We'll try to just send them one at a time. But any of those questions, always feel free to just shoot me a message.
Thank you very much.
Good.
Stacy, I see your comments online, and I appreciate how you are very professional and kind to the people of the city and answering their questions. Thank you very much. I
Thank
really
you very
appreciate
much.
that.
Is there anything else you are needing from me tonight? I'm bailing then. You guys have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Thank you. Yeah, that was it. Okay, yeah. Okay, so it looks like Public Works Director report is included in City Manager's report. So next on the Library Director report, looks like, I believe that's page 142 in the packet.
I'm gonna keep it short, it's almost 9 PM. I do wanna bring up, I need a consensus on speed signs for placement for that, and, if we wanna have that quick discussion.
Real quick, do we have any questions about or comments on the library, or we?
I think Kai's doing his public director.
He is doing
Yes.
that now, okay.
Did I skip the library? I thought that was after me.
It is,
Yeah.
it is, I just thought that the Public Works
Caleb's gonna
Director
skip you
report.
until the city manager.
Yeah, okay,
That
yeah,
works as well.
yeah, I thought your report was in the, City Manager report, so never mind, yeah, so you go ahead, okay. I read that wrong.
So I just wanna let you know, so I'm writing these full on a week before the meeting. So there's a lot of information and questions you might have about the last week. And that's why those questions or the answers may not be in my report, because because I didn't know what questions you might ask. Obviously, the storm event's not in here. I can answer any questions you have about that. But I did want to have a consensus on the speed signs. They're in, we're anxious to get them up. Does anybody have any questions on the public works report? Or questions outside that report?
I'll just make a comment that I had to drive back home from Salem on Thursday when it was super snowy, and Salem streets were still super snowy. Highway 22 was super snowy, River was super snowy, and I was very impressed that by the time I got to Sheridan, the streets were clear. So I just wanted to thank you and Public Works for getting the streets clear. I'm not sure what was going on with all those other roads, but I was happy that Sheridan's were clear.
I drove on the Greenville that day too, and I was really happy to drive in Sheridan.
Yes, that was
Yeah, the crew did a great job. They started early, they prepped well, they started early, got everything going in time, so yes.
Any questions on the report? Okay, so speed signs. So it looks like, the discussions that were discussed, Southbridge, West Main, Jefferson, East Main. My suggestion is Southbridge, West Main, and Jefferson. I don't know if people have other thoughts. I know East Main is bad too, but I know coming in, West Main is bad. Jefferson, I think that was one of the recommendations for, the Safe Routes to Schools for location. I can look at that again. And then Southbridge, there's just a lot of activity. Denny, do you have
Aren't these units mobile?
They are.
So we can swap them around as ever.
The pole they mount on is permanent.
Oh, they go on a pole?
Yeah.
They're not on wheels?
No.
Okay,
No.
gotcha.
But we would just have to add a new base.
Yeah, but the intent is to have them mobile. Yeah. And I also, if council will approve it, we're gonna try and put some more in the budget.
Cool. I like Kale's suggestion, let's start with those three and then let's see how they do. And if they don't seem to be working as well as we wanted, try again, pick a different location.
I don't know for sure, but my assumption is that as the further out East Main you go, the faster people start to get, especially after you get kind of toward like 3 Gatto and the tracks. And we can put one there just to remind people, no, it's still 45 here, but Ian, what was your?
I was just gonna say, I believe that we're gonna probably end up putting some sort of concrete base that's permanent with a hole that we can put it into. So, maybe we could just direct Public Works to do 6 of these locations, or to approve your 3, and then let's do that, and then maybe he could bring us proposed other locations, and we could just approve those, and then we could cycle through them if we want to.
Yeah, if we wanna just do 3 tonight and then add on that, I'll add law enforcement into the conversation.
Yeah.
And then we'll pick some alternate sites for council. Yeah.
Jim?
I was thinking, Sheridan Road, we do get complaints about that as well.
That's what the potholes are for.
Mill as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe that's where the next 3, East Main, Sheridan Road, and
Mill Street for
Mill.
sure, yeah, 'cause they can scream down the hill.
Okay. We'll start small. We haven't had anything like this. All of a sudden we're gonna have speed signs everywhere. But, okay. So if that sounds fine, Southbridge, West Main, and Jefferson, then I think that's what we'll do.
Sure, that sounds good.
That was staff's recommendation as well.
Not East Main, is that what you said?
Right, yeah, not East Main yet.
Got this time.
Okay, that'll disappoint Faith, but
Yeah.
at least we got the signs.
Public Works, we had a little powwow about it, and this is what we came up with.
Sure.
I think in the budget too, as it gets coming up, I think we'll just allocate, okay, we want 3 more, and that's where they'll go.
Sure.
Okay. So Kai, so you've got, some consensus there.
Yes, thank you.
Was that all for your report? Any other questions for Kai?
For Public Works.
Okay. Oh, Liz.
Kai, I do have a question for you. In your report, you added, some information about the Parks and Rec committee members, the open positions for the committee members of Parks and Rec. And we have one, application in our packet. However, I thought someone else had applied too. She told me she had applied. Did an application come in after this was put together?
I have not received an application, only
Yeah,
one.
for Parks and Rec.
We've only received
Really?
one.
One in the packet, but I know of another person that applied, cause I dug up her first application out of my stuff and gave it to her, cause she didn't wanna reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, I talked to her. I also gave her another application. If she did turn one in, it must have been when we were gone due to the snow. But I
Okay.
have not received anything from her.
Okay, alright, I was just curious, cause we need what, 3 people or 4?
3.
At least 3.
Yeah, okay. Alright, thank you.
Okay, so, next is the library.
Gwen is online.
Okay, and that is page,
142.
142, I passed it, okay. Yep. Okay, any questions for Gwen? She's here. Any comments? Jim?
Question, what are overdrive e-resource downloads?
So that is all like our ebooks, audiobooks, that our patrons check out.
And then it looks like computer, I'm just trusting my memory, which is a dangerous thing for me to do, but it looks like computer uses have increased, is that correct?
That is correct. They went up quite a bit actually this month, or in January.
And then it also looked like the youth portion of her program participation has really increased compared to what I saw last month.
Yes.
That's excellent. All those are showing that the library has a really positive effect on the community and it's well used.
Thank you.
Can you mute Liz?
Yep.
Or
Are there enough, Gwen, are there enough computers there? I mean, and like, are people having to wait, to use a computer or anything yet?
No, most of the time we have an empty one when people come in.
Okay.
It's very rare that we ever find that somebody is waiting to get on one of the public computers.
Okay. Okay, any other questions for Gwen? Any comments?
Oh, one last one. I think you're doing a great job, Glenn. Outstanding.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Gwen.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Okay, next, code enforcement, that's certs, page 43.
43.
Any, Jim?
I don't mind looking through the reports because they're always interesting, but it would have been nice to have a cover sheet with like cliff notes that she normally puts in here, but.
Oh, like a summary?
Yeah, just to know who's on first and what she's got going on. Is it because the packet came out so early that she missed that, do you think, Pat? Is that?
I'm not sure.
Okay,
I would suspect it was a combination, Jim, of snow days and Yvonne not being here to herd the cats.
She's also been out of the office.
That's what he said.
Oh, okay.
Excuse me.
Double blend, okay. I just, glancing through them, I didn't find anything truly amazing or surprising, other than there's always something going on at Sheridan, I guess is the way to look at that.
Okay, Ian, did you have anything?
Yeah, just one thing real quick. I went to Wilhelmina's, I try to go to all other council meetings, and I noticed in their packet, I brought it in and showed it to Omega and Kai. And one of the things about code enforcement that I really like, and I heard it was this way at one point, was there was a short description as to kind of how the code enforcement officer had engaged with the citizen and what were the circumstances kind of around it. It was just like a real short little blurb in the code presentation, and I thought that seemed really nice because it was it just gave a little context to kind of what what this code violation actually is. I don't know, maybe council could ask for that or not, but I liked it. If you guys wanna see it, Kai has it.
Okay. Alright, moving on, the city recorder grant tracking report. Any questions on this? Jim?
I have a couple actually. Since she started putting remaining balances on here, on page, I can almost read it here, 160 of 173. One of our, the community development block grant is 71,000 X dollars in the negative, which doesn't sound good. Are we still waiting for reimbursement on that one? Is that?
I'm not aware, Jim.
Okay.
I would have to check on that.
Okay, that's fine. It stood out.
That's the Yamhill Street project, you think?
I'm not
Yes.
sure.
Yeah, okay.
And then,
Oh, okay, that one, yeah. I am aware of that one. Yeah, I think we had 261,000 back so far, and we haven't made another request for a few months.
yeah, it looks like 249,000 reimbursement, but that was back in 9/9/2024. So
Yeah, I think it's 261 now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost 261 for total revenues.
then the other one, which surprised me, on page 162, the remaining balance on our Southside Park improvements, $673,491. That's a lot of money that I haven't seen floating around our budget.
It's because we haven't received our reimbursement.
Okay, so we're still awaiting reimbursement.
Yeah, and that's a phased project as well. So council may have approved the 983,000, but I don't know that more than 600 was in budget.
Okay. And how does reimbursement happen? I just have no clue.
The city does the expenditures and matches, or rather meets the criteria in the grant, and then makes grant reports. It's part of the auditing for the grant. And then we make the request.
So it looks like the Oregon Parks Department isn't very quick to reimburse, is what I'm seeing here.
We have not made a request yet.
Okay.
We are still in the checking the boxes phase for that. So I'm backtracking a bit and getting some reporting done to them. I actually worked on it last week. And then we're trying to get in full compliance with the contract. And once we do that, we're going to make a reimbursement request.
Because it looks like it's saying that it shows that the grant itself ended on 12/31/2024. So we're still slightly behind, but they're even more behind giving us money.
Yeah, we had the request is in for the extension.
Yeah, so thank you.
Okay.
Any questions?
I think Liz has a question. Go ahead, Liz.
Yes, I do. Tyler, this is a question for you. At our last meeting, you brought up that there was an ARPA funds alternative that you were gonna look into for the Department of Treasury. Did you get an answer on that? That there would be an alternative use of the ARPA funds? I think it was regarding the 10%.
Last week, the wage.
Yeah, Laura was one of the COG members who was really sick, so we didn't have our management team meeting, so we don't have an update on that at this point.
Okay, thanks. All right.
Okay, any questions on that report? Okay, we'll then move on to city planner report. Already heard from Liam, but this was different.
At the risk of being rude, boy, have we really heard from Liam.
Any questions on anything he provided in this report, not the other thing? Okay. And we'll move on. So we don't have any ordinances, resolutions, we don't have any unfinished business. So next up is new business and vote city logo contest. So we have 3 here. At the art group meeting, Ian.
I'll just say that, I know that at least 2 people expressed to me that they wanted to make a submission, and it was past the date, which I think was the 10th of something. And I said, yeah, just, try calling into, and see if you could make a submission anyway, and I'm assuming they didn't. But the 3 submissions, we only had 3 submissions?
Well, so we, the art group picked like the top 3. We had more than 3 submissions, but we
Oh, okay.
picked the top 3 that we had of the submissions. So as the art group kind of discussed their thoughts, the number 1 was kind of their clear, I guess, choice, and then they really like number 2, and kind of the thought with that is that could be like on our website somewhere, added color. I even thought in some of the places in town where we don't have one of those welcome to Sheridan signs, we could put this there, like coming, like from Willamina, or even, I'm trying to think where else we don't have one of those wood signs. But looking at this, that's what it reminds me of, is those wooden signs when you're coming into town. And I thought that would be, a nice kind of new, look, a new sign to put up when we're coming into town. Jim?
Well, I know we're, awarding money for first, second, third, because I made that motion to award the top 3 places of money. I'm not disappointed with these, but I'd be very interested if Ian knows 2 other people that would still like an opportunity, just to give them that opportunity. What you said about the art group's opinion of number 1 is probably true, especially if you have it in color versus black and white. That top one is a lot better looking than it looks on the page here. But I think it would be nice to get as many potential as possible, because like I say, we're going to be paying some money out. We should ensure that everyone's had the best opportunity. If they missed that deadline, normally I'd say, well, tough funds, but in this case, I think it'd be good to get any more submissions that we could.
Jim, are you suggesting that they be included in the price?
No, I'm suggesting that they be allowed to submit, and then let the art group look at it again. If we get the same 3 back, well, then that's what we get. But if they decide, oh, hey, that's kind of nice too, I think that would be a good option.
We'll get back to, we did speak to someone, and that was the direction we gave them, was that they were welcome to turn them in, but they would not be able to receive any prize money if it was selected.
Oh, well,
I don't know who that was, though.
Cool. Yeah, I think I would just like to see them
So we're
be
on the
able to
same
submit, and if they don't get any money, that wouldn't bother me, because we're spending still $900, and if we select theirs, we say, oh, sorry, you were late, but we like your design, and you'll see it on all our stationery envelopes, etc.
Dan?
I have a little concern with number 1. Number 1 is not too far off from what we have right now, but my big concern is the font size. When you reduce that down to the size that we use, those little lines in there are gonna disappear on the bridge.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you reduce stuff down and you see things disappear, so that's my concern with that, that's all.
Yeah, and that would be one of the things, and any comments really, if say we decided to pick number 1, things like that, we can make those changes. These are like the submissions, and then we're going to take the logo, get it. If the creator doesn't have it like in a vector format or something like that, where it's basically, you can make this big and small as you want, and it doesn't lose its quality. We can make tweaks to it. We talked to Janos at the bulletin board. He was part of the art group and was kind of helping us understand how that kind of works. So we'll probably be paying someone, if the logo isn't already in that format, to get it there. And those types of changes would be something that we could do. Just make sure, like, okay, the general idea is here, but we want to make sure that it scales small and big. But yeah, those types of comments are helpful. So if it sounds like we might be waiting to get more submissions, but you know, comments like that, like say, okay, we want this to be the logo with these changes, would be basically what would happen.
So would we, cause we have letterheads already, right? Envelopes, whatever. Would we use those up before we would put this out, or would we throw those away and start?
I would assume it might just be kind of a weird, mix, because I don't wanna waste envelopes.
No.
But, I mean, for example, we have, you know, we could start putting them on the city vehicles and things, you know. We could have it, I don't know, we could make somebody make a metal sign, we can have it out front or something, you know, start incorporating it.
Yeah.
And then once we're out of, maybe order new city envelopes so they're here, so we don't completely run out of envelopes. But then use all the old ones and then we start using the new ones, would be my thought. Jim?
What Denny just said, it just, as I looked at this, yeah, you shrink that down to a smaller size, even the word Sheridan is gonna be, hard to, decipher with that font, that specific font.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, even though I mentioned that, the top one, the black and white one, actually, I'm color challenged, but it looked to be green and white to me, but potentially, we might wanna see a little more color than just green and white, or black and white. Cause, you know, the third, number 3 here, at least has, some color to it, which, is a nice, addition. Makes it stand out a little bit, but again, the same, font, even though it's very small, I can read it, but, some might not be able to.
Yeah, and I think, too, we can pick the color. I mean, we could ask I think the thought would be to ask the artist first, like, hey, we were gonna add more color to this, what would you think? And then we can see what they think, and we can kind of make our own.
And then my next question, do I need to make a motion to extend the, end date so that, those out there who haven't applied yet but have a design in mind can get their design in? Does that require a motion, or can we just say, hey, we're gonna extend it to, the end of February or something?
Yeah, I don't know that would require a motion. I think we can just say, that's.
Something
leave it open another.
get the word out to let people know that, hey, there's still time, there's a chance to get your design accepted.
Yeah, let me pull up calendar. Peter, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, next time we vote on these, ideally get it printed a little better so we can see the colors and such. And then also, as far as losing details when we shrink things, we talked about vector stuff, but usually in web design, like, you would have a range of different icons for different sizes. And so if we pick one, we can, before we officially adopt it, we can get it adapted to the different sizes and then vote on that.
Yeah, like, or kind of come to a consensus. So like, say this one, with a little bit more detail, if it's bigger, but then we could cut out the railing and maybe just have the bridge.
Yeah, exactly.
We can tweak it, and I think, we kind of talked about that in the art meetings, and like, the city of Seattle, I pulled that up, because they have a whole page, and it's just, they're different logos, and it says when you use them for what.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like I don't know if it's called a design book or a style guide, something like that.
Yeah.
But
style
yeah,
guides, right.
but that's basically what we would, something like that we would do. Lucy?
I think that regardless of what we do, we should run it by a graphic designer, and they don't charge that much money. And they can also help you realize that this font's too small for what you have, but it would work for something else. They also know how to reconfigure it so that you can still keep the essence of what the picture is, but it still conveys what you're trying to say. But like, for example, something like this would probably look, if it was, I prefer some color, that would look good on the city vehicles, because you could make it bigger. And on that, you could see, I kind of like the railing on there, but you're right, when you bring it down to this size, it's gonna look a lot like the wagon wheel that's on a current heading. But, they know how to manipulate it and say, look, you need something for a letterhead, or business card. There'd be something different for the vehicle, obviously, because it stands out so much better. And then whatever you were kind of waiting for that third option, like little greeting type, you said, other than the big signs that we have, wherever you might wanna put it, but they'd be able to expand that. And they don't charge a lot of money, and they also have a real good flow with color if the artists themselves, because a lot of times they don't realize how much money costs on signs.
Yeah, so the last meeting, Janos was there, and I know he does a bunch of different stuff. I don't know if website design is exactly he does, but he was the one that was, talking to us about, kind of the scale and things like that, and he had some suggestions for this logo too.
Okay.
He thought this one would be, the best, and would require, I guess, the least work to make it, work. But yeah, and I can even, so I know there's a couple other people that kind of do this type of thing. I mean, Ashton was on a couple of those meetings too, and he had some feedback. We can even get some feedback if council wants, and they can kind of provide it and what their thoughts are on the logos. But I think too, using them in different ways, I think, because I still really like two, and we can still use two in certain aspects. Like I think, website or those signs or whatever. But okay, Liz.
Okay, my question is if we extend the date for more submissions, and I think someone said something about this, but I didn't really get it. How does that impact the three that we've already chosen who got it in on time and the financial reward?
I think, I thought Jim,
Yeah, what I thought was, well, it was kind of roundabout, but if they present late, okay, even if they are selected, they're not gonna get the reward because, hey, you're late. And yes, we like your design, but sorry, there are certain things that we wanted, and if you couldn't get it in on time, then sorry about that.
you think no money or just half money?
I'm not.
If we're formally extending the due date, then they are not late.
That makes sense.
I vote for that.
Okay.
The
Yeah.
13th, we would need the, but then the art group has to.
Yeah, so the next council meeting is the 17th. I mean, if we make, I'm trying to give people, I don't know, do we want to review them at the April work session?
Yeah.
We could do that, because then we could have it say, the new deadline is March 18th. Please, send them in, and then the art group, that way the art group can meet the next week, although that's spring break, so. Well, no, we have the whole first week of April, because the first work session is the 7th. That should work, unless somebody has different ideas. Lucy?
I think that these folks who have submitted these also, because all three of them are very nice, but there's not just one I particularly like. I like a little bit about each one of them. I think they should have the ability to go back and make any changes accordingly. Like, color would be good. I like the idea of the bridge on this, and I like the way the S is in there, that the sun should have, yellow, and yet it's not quite it, but then I do like I like actually a little bit about all three of them, to be honest with you. But maybe they should go in after, if they've hopefully heard this meeting, that they might wanna do some revamping, or, like the, number one, once you take that down to the size of a letterhead, before we take it maybe because we have the option of using a graphics art designer, because we talked about that, is they could try to go in and just kinda, put themselves in a better standing after hearing our comments so far. I think they should be able to have the ability to go back and revamp it if they should so choose.
Yeah, and they can provide colors, and then
Colors they
also,
want?
because that one is supposed to be green.
Well, I mean, look at this
Number
one, this
one,
one's black and white, and that one's color, that just gives you a really good idea of which way you could go or something in between. But the other ones are just kind of, pretty much black and white.
Yeah, and that was, we were asking for one color, one black and white, but this one, the number one came across as black instead of dark green.
Oh, was it dark green?
Well, it's supposed to be kind of a green, like the bridge color, but I don't think it came across.
I think we print the package in black and white.
Well, this one's this one's color though. So I don't know, but yeah, it was a darkish green. It wasn't like super colorful. So okay.
Reopening until March.
Yeah, new deadline March 18th. If that works for everybody, Jim.
One nice thing, if you remember way back to the wayfaring project that offered us a logo, there's no tractor here. I think that's nice.
Well,
that's
and
what kind of sums the whole program, is when we said we want something besides a tractor, and then it just went away.
well, and once we have a logo too, we can start thinking about ways to implement it, things we can do. Like I thought, different colors could be for different departments or something. Just a random idea, but say we went with number one, stuff like that. Like once we have a logo, we can start thinking of different ways because it's like still it's all tied together, but still kind of slightly different, has their own identity, I suppose. But okay, so new deadline March 18th. We can talk to people. I can email the people who submitted them and let them know if they want to tweak their submissions because they did, first, second, third, give optional colors, things like that, and then we can talk to the bulletin board, whoever else that says this is still open. We want more submissions. So okay, so that was the first item. Okay, next, approved budget calendar fiscal year 25-26. Looking at it, seemed like pretty standard, like what we've done in the past. Jim?
It makes no difference, but I noticed that we're gonna publish the notice that we're gonna have the budget worked on the city website one day, and then the next day it goes to the news register, and then the same for, the publication of the budget. Can't we do that on the same day? I mean, it just seems odd, it doesn't matter.
You mean item number 4 and number 5?
4 and 5, and then down on, 10 and 11, it's like, it's the same, we're doing the same things, that one's on their website, one's going to the news register. I just wondered why. It seems like it was
from what I recall, there's different, like reporting requirements for websites and the news media, but, I don't know what the reasoning would be. I think, cause the first time it's sent to the news register is April 13th, but then the second notice is May 2nd. So I'm not exactly sure, but I think that probably just has to do with timing.
that just stood out as, wow, one, fine.
I believe it's to make sure, Jim, that both the website and the formal publication in the newspaper are effective the day that it's published in the newspaper.
Okay.
So I think that's an internal deadline so that we don't
Makes sense.
mess it up.
Like that. Thank you.
Does anybody want to change any dates
No.
or anything? Okay. Doesn't sound like that's suggested. I mean, I think this is pretty good. I think this kind of format's work, Jim.
I move to approve the budget calendar for fiscal year 2025-2026.
Second.
Okay, first and second, any more discussion? Okay, go ahead and vote, all in favor? Okay, alright, that's unanimous, okay. Moving on, Parks and Recs committee members, we just have one, applicant, anybody opposed to this person being appointed? Okay, well then I'll go ahead and appoint, Alicia Myers to the Parks and Recs committee. I'm glad she's still interested. Okay, so next, this isn't a vote, this is just a new business item. I mentioned the facade grant. So I know Sheridan Revitalization Movement is doing a facade grant, I believe. I'm not sure what the limit is for number of applications, but I know they're doing like $1,000 grant award. And then the Chamber of Commerce, I don't know if they finalized it. They're gonna be awarding some money for facade grants as well. And I talked to Ian about it, and it was kind of, he had the idea of either the city matching it or doing our own grant. Might be less work for us if we just match either chamber or revitalization. But I think if council likes that idea, then we can talk with city staff and see if there's funds available. We could possibly use money from one of the community grants, or if there's possibly other money available. Jim?
I'd like to see where we're gonna get the money from. And then a rough, from the staff, they can give us a best idea of how much money we have, wherever it comes from.
Okay, yeah, my first thought was make sure the council's interested, and then 2, then we can find where, if it's possible, if there's money. Does that sound? Okay.
Consensus to explore.
Yeah, okay, we can do that. Alright, next, Kai, do you have more for your city manager report?
Just unless anybody has any questions, I think there are some tour dates. I don't know if you've got the emails yet. If you haven't, you will be getting them. Please select those.
I appreciate that it's Saturday. I will say March 15th 15th, I think most of us hopefully are going to a training we'll line up for
Oh,
I think it's
okay.
LLC.
That's
Forget.
Saturday.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I forget who was doing it, but yeah, so March 15th,
So,
probably not for us. 'Cause well, I'm planning on going to that one, so, but yeah, if, you gave us a lot of dates though, so hopefully we can come to a consensus. I don't know if everyone's looked at them, if there's any dates that definitely don't work for somebody. I know in the email, I think it said pick the ones that work, but maybe we can, well, I guess if all of them work for you, then all of them work for you. We can just share that in the email.
does council have any objections about the bulletin board tagging along?
No?
I did speak to OVIC recently, and they did say that they would be happy to come out here as well to provide those sorts of classes. I don't know how happy they actually are to have multiple events for different cities, but that's what they told me.
Okay. Yeah, I think if we're able to, go to Willamette, because I have heard that in the past, is that they will do it, but I think, I'm assuming they prefer to do one and hit multiple. But yes, if we need, if somebody can't make the one in Willamette, or if, additional trains in the future, I know that's a resource, for OK. Jim?
What is the Yamhill Rivers NPS RTCA core team?
That is a core team that Heidi was spearheaded to put together for boat launching facilities in the region. And Sheridan was the head of that core team. I opted out of it because it is Yamhill County and is now involving Polk County. And there are 15 sites, only one of them is in Sheridan. And I think that Yamhill County would be better served as the lead role in that position, and we will continue to support.
Thank you.
The project snowballed in a very good way as it got going.
More the merrier.
It's not necessarily that we're losing a site, it's just we're not, like, spearheading the
Plus,
effort.
with the current pace of work in the city, I imagine not having to worry about that also would be a good
Yeah,
thing.
I think it was a lot of effort, I'm sure, to put that group together and get that going. So there's a lot of moving pieces there. So we also have Ernie Hebert who attends all of those. And he's going to the Polk County ones.
Oh, cool. Okay, any other questions on that? Okay, alright, second comment period. Maggie, did we get anything? Okay. Oh, then we can move on. Okay, council comments. Does anybody have anything? Jim?
With the current federal changes of money not being allocated, our ARPA funds are still right where they belong, and we haven't. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Second question would be the West Main Street fence. I see that there are boards up right now. Is there any further planning other than maybe waiting for spring as opposed to middle of winter to try and?
For the rail, we got hit. Yeah, we have bids coming in, and we have some extra rail.
That's what I thought you said
Yeah.
a long while back. We have extra pieces, so basically.
Yeah, we've been using that to show people. But yeah, we're gonna get that scheduled on. I'm not sure what effort that's gonna take to repair that. But, yeah.
Is it possible, well, one of the placement could it be wherever Ernie got the fencing for the plaza over there? Cause I know that's not exactly the same.
Yeah, I mean, we're still working on the bids. I think we only have 2 in, so.
Okay. I can't remember, I feel like the style's a little different, but
It
I
is.
think it's close.
Does that include the benches? The benches that got destroyed,
We have the bids for those.
and is that insurance on the city or on the vehicle?
I don't have answers for that
Okay.
yet. Yeah, we have, I mean, we've contacted the state police, we got everything back, we've sent it to the insurance company. And I just haven't heard back from
Yeah,
them.
I had thought that bonehead deserved to pay the cost for.
I did get everything into the DA. I made sure the DA had everything for his court date.
Thank you.
Liz?
That Denny just asked my question, and I was wondering guy that did the damage would be responsible for it, so it was answered, thank you.
Well, yeah. Okay, Jim.
I just have one, this is not a question, I got an advanced copy of the bulletin board, and you might already know this, Ian, you said you went to the city council meeting in Lone Pine. They said no to ODOT. We don't wanna work with you, you put in any, handicap things you want, but sorry, we're staying.
Wonder, how that'll work out.
I don't know what.
They said no.
To ODOT, ODOT wanted them to, work with them, and maybe, I don't know what they were proposing to put in, because that was not in the paper, but.
The last like that we approved.
They're basically saying that that was I can't remember, village road, county, what do they call it, market road. That was a market road that was owned by the city of Willamina before it was a highway.
Oh.
Yeah.
Interesting, but yeah, I just read that they said, nope, get away with
ODOT
that.
has to move their pipes if they need to get moved.
Gotcha. Good.
Well, we're not good.
Yeah,
Because
I'm
ODOT's
interested.
probably just gonna.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how that'll happen.
So their engineer is confident, I can tell you that.
ODOT's.
Willamina's engineer.
Okay, Ian.
As far as announcements for executive sessions goes and that stuff, can we get, I mean, maybe I didn't see it or something, but for some reason I thought there was one today. I had a couple people ask me about it. Maybe we can get better contacts on that, and like the media as well, that's typically coming to that. And also, can we get West Valley Transparency, who has filled out and been approved in the past, to be listed on the media policy and to be added on that?
Oh, on the policy?
The accepted organizations, please.
Thank you.
Okay, any other? Lizzie?
Yeah, what's going on at the end of Sheridan Road that they locked that up now for, dumping stuff?
We reopened last week, we closed it for a week. We had someone dump trash and it got mingled into the recycling bin. And the city's been getting charged for that. If the truck picks it up and we don't see it, the city gets charged for that. So we closed it so we could hand pick out all the garbage that was buried in the metal bin and then restack all the metal bin in there. It took us a couple days. We reopened it, and the very day we reopened it, someone from Grand Round, and I have their name and address, so is the sheriff's department, threw garbage out again, the very day we opened. It wasn't open for more than 4 or 5 hours.
Did they find out who did it before on the
No.
camera system?
No, they're not, the cameras aren't. The manual.
I'm worried about what you're gonna say, so
Thank you.
don't.
Thank
Cameras
you.
are great.
So, but they did get the other people when they did, the police have that? And it's, so now is it open just limited hours or?
It's open during staff time. My goal is
Excuse me, would you say
during staff time, yeah, if we have staffing available, it's open. I'm hoping to get it open on a Saturday. That's my goal.
Kind of slowly.
Yeah, we'll just reopen it back up and hopefully with some partnership.
Yeah, is Recology still?
We're
kind of
waiting to hear.
Okay. Okay.
The recycling water.
Yeah.
Okay, Jim.
Along with what Lucy was just saying, that in the past, Heidi had said that yes, we've got the license numbers, and yes, the sheriff is working with us. Did we get any recompense from, having a sheriff talk to whoever they actually found that have dumped garbage in places it shouldn't have been dumped, or?
In some issues, the vehicle has been previously sold and not re-registered. So while the previous owners contacted me, the sheriff's department was unable to locate the new owner.
Sad.
From what I know of prior deputy visits after we've had these issues, those visits have gone well and the person understood. I don't know that we've had repeat.
So were they getting a warning, or did they actually get some sort of
It was, as
financial?
far as I'm aware, it was just a
talking to you.
Okay, thank you.
I think code enforcement also plays a role in locating them.
Good.
Angela does a great job, fantastic job.
Okay, anything else?
Whatever, I think I was asking about the portable showers last meeting, or the provoking hope. I've even had a couple people who said they could really use a shower. They come into my office and they could use a shower. And I said, well, they have portable shower units that we have. And, I didn't know what to tell them after that, and I don't know what happened to them.
They're still on city property being stored.
Maybe somebody needs to, if Provoking Hope is interested, because I have the assumption that the city's no longer interested in using them, so we can maybe find somebody else who wants them.
As in, the city was never gonna really use them, they were just gonna supply them to, outreach center. I thought that's what they were gonna do before.
I don't think the city took ownership.
I am unaware of any arrangements the city has with anybody about.
I think
I didn't know what it was till I asked.
I think it still
That's
technically
my knowledge.
belongs to a compass, and that we're just kind of holding it, because,
Cause they have.
yeah. But yeah, if Provoking Hope, I guess would be, I'm not sure where they would put it.
Well, there's a vacant lot right to the east of it that goes with that building.
Oh, they own it. Well, I guess
They would be renting it, but they could ask the landlord. I think when I asked them before, when they were gonna be, closer to the city hall, they were interested in it, but that was then and this is now.
I guess then at that point, it would be up to Compass and Provoking Hope. We just kind of are holding it.
And I thought that group was gonna give it to the city. Maybe not, but I thought that they were gonna give it to the city, because that's why we went to Matt to look at them and stuff. At least I went up there.
Yeah, I don't remember that. I don't know if maybe that there was talks about it, but I don't know that ever got, I'm not sure the status of that.
Was it possible that the city could reach out, find out
Yes.
who owns them?
Yes.
If Provoking Hope's interested, because you can't do it in a day, but there are probably people that could really use it, and then they could work with their landlord.
This is gonna do.
Okay, Liz.
I think that it was YCAP that owned them, because we went to YCAP's property, looked at them, and then the person to talk to was, I can't remember her name, she ran the point in time count too. Her name, I can't remember her name right now, but that's who gifted them to the city of Sheridan. So we should start.
We'll check.
Yeah.
And we'll connect the people.
Yeah, because I don't think they were ever, from any questions I asked, it was never that we actually owned them, but we'll find out the status. Jim?
The point in time count was done by Compass Shambo Valley. So it's the head of Compass Shambo Valley, she would have some sort of information for us.
It's either YCAP or Encompass or.
Well, if they were, I really do think, what Liz said, that it belongs to YCAP or Compass Shambo Valley, so that they'd be willing to do something. I'm not gonna put words in their mouth, but.
There's a few things going on. Okay, we'll find out. Okay, anything else?
Yeah, what's going on across the street?
Public Works has been trying to get Northwest Natural to remove the gas services to those two houses for over 30 days. I sent them an email today when Ken Peterson asked me to get involved because they have not been moving, so they got an email to me this morning. We're not paying for the excavator that's sitting there.
I was gonna say, how much is the city in that so far?
They were rented by the hour, and I don't remember the exact rate, but we were down the hour meter.
Does the city own that excavator?
No, that's much larger than what we have.
But we'll only be billed for what we use.
Hours used.
It's sitting there, isn't costing us money.
I was just wondering about what they were into that so far.
I think we're 2.5 hours in.
I mean,
Even the whole.
the whole thing. I didn't know if you had to get, including the asbestos and, just
I'm
the
not tracking it
demolition
that
of the
way.
lot.
I'm not tracking it that way. could, but I'm not tracking that as a project.
So the
But we
state,
could figure out where
Absolutely,
we could pull that together.
yes. Once it's done, yeah. She will let you know.
well, I just kinda wanted to know how much they're into it, cause it's, equally, if not worse, ugly than it was before. And it's just sitting there doing nothing, so that's the reason why I asked. And other people have asked me the same thing, and I said, good question.
It's Northwest Natural. It's a great question, and tell them I'm sorry. Yeah, it is an eyesore.
Ian, do you have anything?
I was just gonna make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, go ahead.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second. Third.
Alright, all in favor? Alright, I think it's unanimous. Okay, alright, it's, we're adjourned, it's 9:48.
Recording stopped.
This is definitely